If you'll just mention that. I'm Jennifer Gravitt, and District 4, which is Weaver and Davis counties.
And I'm Carol Lear, and I'm a board member from District 7, which is Park City and Salt Lake.
I'm Elisa Ellis, District 12, and so if you've listened to me, it's just kind of like resist I'm just kidding, the Hunger Games type thing. But I represent a lot of counties. It's a great area, which includes a lot of rural Utah, as well as Orem and part of Alpine District. So anyways, that's me.
Jenny Earl. I'm actually running for state school board in District 1, and I'm here for the health standards.
Good.
Thanks.
I'm Jolie Honey, and I'm the STEM coordinator, and I'm here for a few items on the agenda.
I'm Diana Sedrith. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning, and I'm here to support my specialists on the first four items.
I'm Jody Kaufman. I'm the health specialist, so I'm here for the health standards.
That makes sense.
Mark Watterson, the American Heart Association, and we're here in support of the health standards.
Yes.
I'm Rob Larson, the Substance Abuse Prevention and Intervention Specialist here at USD.
Travis Cook, State Board of Ed, Career Connections / Financial Literacy.
Ooh, new title there,
yeah. So CTE is the section I operate in.
So we're here, Debbie Davis, the Director of Internal Audit, General Understanding and Knowledge. Might be running out to other committee meetings, so I will try not to be disturbance.
Joylyn Lincoln, and I'm talking on the 910 other training.
Okay.
Corby Easton, Student Support and Prevention, here at USB.
Jeff Ed Holton, Policy Advisor here at USB. I'm here for every item.
Oh. And we are here for you.
He does.
Sarah Young, Coordinator for Digital Teaching and Learning. I'm here for the 2 items on digital teaching and learning.
And I'm Todd Call, Digital Teaching and Learning Specialist here at USB, and here for the new plan submissions for the DTL grant program.
Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning, just here for fun.
Oh,
wow. That's exciting. That's why we're all here.
Yeah.
That is why we're all here.
Yes. Sherry Rubin, and I'm here at USB.
Patty Norman, Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement, here to support the board and all staff members that are here today present.
Okay, good. So our first item is an action item. It's 3.1, the health standards revision. So I'll ask Jody Kaufman to come and talk to us about it. In July of 2017, the board approved initiating the revision process. In March 2017, the board approved organization of the writing committee. It looks like we have some standards, and I would love Jody to talk to us about those.
Yeah, so we have the writing committee has met over 30 times,
wow.
And we have a draft that we would like the board to open for the 90-day public review.
Do you guys have any questions for Jody? Yeah.
Does anyone have a copy of the motion that passed out of this, when we opened up the health standards
In July
review?
2017?
Yeah. We don't have a copy of that. I just want to see the scope of what was approved by the board. So if someone could help me find that, I can go find it while I'm here.
Yeah, what was the meeting?
It was July 2017, and if I recall,
it would be in the minutes.
Yeah. I mean, we just opened them up. I mean, we had a big discussion.
That
but
might not, the exact language may not be in the minutes.
Yeah, but if we went back to
well,
that.
but that's what is
board docs.
approved.
Full board of July.
Oh.
Yeah.
Whatever's in the minutes is what counts as approved. I just want to see what the scope was. But we can continue on as that gets.
Well, you guys are thinking of questions. I do want to ask Jody. So I noticed that the standards go from over 100 down to 30. Can you talk to us about the advantage of that, or why the committee decided that?
Yeah, so this actually went back to, so we go back to the review committee, which had the 10 parents, and then the 7 members that were chosen by board chair. And that committee made a recommendation that we make them more teachable. Health is only a semester course in middle school and high school, and with over 100 standards, it's impossible to get them all. And it ended up being a lot more like a checklist. So it was like every single thing that we'd ever want a teacher to ever say, it was check, 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 and that's really not great teaching practice. So this way, we have bigger items that allows for more local control. So a district or charter can create their curriculum based on the standards.
It's important.
And it also makes it a lot easier to teach within a semester range.
Yeah.
And then in elementary, So same thing, when you have 100 standards in elementary, that's so overwhelming for a teacher that has so much more to teach. So we were really trying to target the items that we felt were the right item at the right year. And make it teachable.
And I love that they vertically align, like they're the same strands from young kids to older kids.
Yep.
And when I looked at the crosswalk, I noticed that a lot of things are taken care of, specifics are taken out, and it's more general. So
So we did create the crosswalk so you can see where the old standards meet the new ones. So you can see that everything that's new, there's a piece where the old ones, you can see where it's covered.
Go ahead.
So are you not going to do a overall presentation? So you're just here for us to have
We just need to
comments?
approve the 90-day.
We're just trying to get to review, but
Okay.
yes.
I have a lot of,
Okay,
a
go ahead.
lot, if that's
Of
okay.
course you do. I meant that with love in my heart.
Well,
Sorry. Good thing.
So I am concerned about the level of mental health things in here because I'm thinking of it like a restaurant. When we have a restaurant that tries to put everything on the menu, they typically don't specialize in anything well. And I'm concerned that education to some degree is becoming this, we're trying to be everything for everybody, and now we're entering into the mental health industry. And the way a lot of these standards are worded with words like demonstrate, argue, there's a lot of terms that are, in my opinion, creating an argumentative state where we're just getting into the heads of kids. There's many standards in here in the mental health area that are concerning to me, that are asking the student to almost be the watchmen for all of their peers. And yes, I believe in good Samaritans and everyone being mindful of those around them, but at what cost do we do that to a student that doesn't understand in psychology how to not let someone else's burdens transfer onto them? And I'm concerned about the level of responsibility we're putting on the student as well as the teacher to fill a role that they don't have proper training in it. We cannot adequately give them the proper training to become clinical psychologists. We just can't. We can't do that. So we can say you have to take this training, that training, this other training, but they're not going to school to become a clinical psychologist. And so I'm concerned that we're creating almost group therapy sessions in the classroom without proper trained specialists in there.
Can you give some examples?
Yeah, I would love to hear an
where
example,
that
because I was
happens?
looking through, and a
well,
lot of them.
I have one where I put some notes, so that might be easier for me to find where I put all my notes. But
And then while you're looking for that, and Jody,
But
maybe
I
you
have
can
more
help
than
with
that,
this.
too.
Like, the teachers who teach this topic, they are trained to do this.
Yes,
And-
mental health is a required
Yeah, that's part
course
of their training.
Okay,
that
but
they
it's
take
not.
to become a health teacher.
There's a
Yeah.
difference between taking some courses on mental health and becoming a trained psychologist, a clinical psychologist.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the role, but maybe.
Right.
you
Well,
can
and
help
so I
out.
think if we tweak the language, then they can teach philosophies without, when we're putting in some of these words like demonstrate and other things like that, it's my feeling that we're using it in a way that, anyways, I'd like to see some verbiage taken out. I'm not comfortable with the amount of role play that is put in here. There's one, and they build on each other so much, and so it starts, little, but then by the end, and this one's not in the mental health, sorry, but it's just an example of demonstrate, is where it says,
tell us where
sorry,
you're
those
looking.
aren't my notes, so it's hard for me to find.
Yeah, tell us where you're looking, what grade.
So there's a section that talks about argue. Let me just do control find. That's probably my easiest
Tell us
route.
the grade and the strain.
Okay, so why don't things work when I'm in the meeting?
27.
So yeah, argue. I put it in Word doc, and
Oh.
so it's hard because it's not the exact same format.
Okay.
Argue the importance of health screenings, immunizations, checkups. You could say we're going to teach these, but when we're putting in the standard that then is tested, argue. There's a lot of people that have alternative views on health and things, and we're now saying we know, better, and we're going to pit someone's personal family beliefs against that of
But can you tell us where it says that?
Yeah, could you tell us
Yeah,
what
it's right
grade?
here. So she said the
In
page,
board
but
docs, it's at the top of page 27A.
yeah.
But do you know
Oh,
what grade it is?
Yeah, these are in high school.
So,
I thought I
sorry,
opened
I
up
didn't
the,
control it, yeah.
I thought I opened up the PDF, but it's
Well,
not showing.
and I might suggest that when you say argue, like I'm thinking of language arts, you are looking at many different sides.
Right.
Well, I mean, I hope that's how teachers
But
are trained.
but this says argue the importance of these things. And
Well,
so.
they could be important or they could not.
Right, so depending on someone's
You feel like it's
personal
leading.
viewpoint, I feel like it's leading.
So what would you prefer?
Yeah, and I would like to hear Jody's response to that.
So all of these are absolutely things that, I mean, 90-day public review, that's
Yeah.
why we do this.
Right,
Okay,
but-
that's
So
a
that
good
we
point.
can.
Yes, but we're the board, and so the
Correct.
board has ultimate authority over everything, and so I don't think it's
Absolutely.
inappropriate for the board members to go through either and to give, you know.
Diana?
So just a couple of like process things about this. So one thing to keep in mind is that the verbs, all of the standards begin in verbs, and the verbs are directed towards the students.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying about it has to be taught, but whatever verb we might replace it with has to be something the student does or demonstrates that shows, and that's why I demonstrate a lot, that shows that they have actually learned, because it's not just about the teaching, it's about the learning. So that's one thing. The other thing is, just in terms of process, what has happened in previous standards is, you're right, board members go through with a fine-tooth comb, and we love to get those like all in writing, and then those are the kinds of things that Jody can then take back to her committee, and they can say, she can say, okay, this verb argue is problematic, what could we change it with? And then they can work that all through instead of you having to work it all through. And then that all happens during the 90 days.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that has to be how things are done. We're in a committee meeting, and I don't see any problem with pointing out some things in a public setting instead of
right.
sending a document that people don't see.
It's just helpful if you'll do that as a follow-up.
Right.
I'm
Well,
not saying don't talk
I'm
about
working
it.
about it. I mean, I'm working on that, but you know, on the spot, it's a little bit difficult. But maybe I'll look at these notes instead of those because it.
So what you're saying is that if there are certain concerns, would you be okay with then sending them and say,
Yes,
I really
but
have
I'd
trouble with
also
this
like
word.
to talk
You'd like to
about
say
it.
them too, but we could also send it, and then that could be part of the 90-day review.
Right.
Just for time's sake,
And I
if we
have
don't have a
written
lot
down.
of. Okay, great. Okay, go ahead, Elisa.
Sorry. So abstinence in state law, it says that we will have an emphasis on abstinence.
Yes.
And abstinence is just kind of thrown in here as an afterthought, it feels. And there's not a clear definition of abstinence. Most of the references to abstinence say abstinence as it relates to, and I'm concerned that without a clear definition of abstinence in contrast with state law, that we are leaving it open-ended. So abstinence as it relates to pregnancy. So there's a lot of ways that other people may define abstinence that goes out above and beyond the scope of getting pregnant. And so I feel that this conflicts with state statute where it opens the door to possible illicit things being taught or discussed because it doesn't relate to pregnancy or anyways. And I feel like we're focusing a lot on risk reduction where we say abstinence and then we say let me find the standard.
Yeah, it's in
there's-
HD3.
Yeah, there's
Human
many
development.
of them.
Page 23.
Yeah. and
Let me
then
just type in
24,
abstinence on my word search. and
There's
then I can find them
abstinence with sexually transmitted diseases, abstinence with pregnancy.
Well,
It's in Health 1 and Health 2.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in Health 2, HD2, for instance, it says evaluate the effectiveness of various contraceptives as methods, including abstinence of preventing pregnancy. Well, abstinence is supposed to be the emphasis, and so I would like to see that reworded to reflect that instead of it being like, oh yeah, and abstinence, because that is the way that state law defines it.
And where would that be, Elisa?
HD2.
No, I've got that, but where do you say in state law it emphasizes?
I don't have state statute
May I
pulled up.
respond?
You please, Jody.
Okay. So specifically with abstinence, every health teacher has to take a law and policy course, and that definition is very clear to them. They go through training that is very specific to Utah law. In Health 1, where this begins, this starts on Health 1. So if you look at the HD standards, which are 20, should be 23 and 24
Yes.
on your document.
Yeah.
It is very clear in there, and Health 2 is meant to be the second course of this.
Seeing where it
And-
was clear. Can you show me where you think it's clear?
So, yes. So we have, sorry, let me go back to the first one.
I really struggle with the.
And we did have definitions in there.
Yeah.
I wondered
And
about that.
we,
I was gonna say, I saw
at this point, we
definitions.
had definitions, and abstinence, we have the state definition for abstinence, which is to avoid, and it talks about all sexual activity. It also has abstinence from substance abuse, abstinence from, so we have those definitions.
But it's
and-
not in this document.
Correct. We had decided that the resources would be an additional document that we, because that way if codes change,
Good.
we can change the codes. But the definitions absolutely, we have them and they're available for all the teachers for all of these items. So if we look, so we have, it'd be HIHD 3, item B. Define abstinence as it relates to pregnancy and compare and contrast the effectiveness of various contraceptive methods. In the law and policy course that every health teacher has to take, and FACS teachers, so if they teach this as well, they have to take this class as well. We have assurance forms that every LEA marks off that the teachers have gone through the training. It talks about how, we have questions on there. So if a student says, what's the best way? So if a student were to ask that, this is an example, the answer is abstinence is the only guaranteed method of preventing STDs or pregnancy. So we have very clear trainings, and that training it's free, it is open to every teacher. I will give them in person as well. I was just
Can
in
you
Washington.
attach all of that to Board Docs? So we can look at it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Patty?
Board Member Ellis, are you looking for something that then actually refers back to so that we have
Well, I
something?
think that would be good if
So
it's
but-
written, if
but
it refers
within
back.
the standard itself, so that we have something similar to what policy, so Jeff, I'm kind of asking you what that would look like if it's written within the standard to refer back to a definition somewhere. I think maybe what you're saying is the definition could change, and then have we approved something that
Yeah.
isn't something that we really want? Or by saying the definition, but we don't know what the definition is, because it's not right here, then it hasn't referred back to whatever it is
Well,
we're looking at. Is that what you're talking about?
Right, and you also create a lot of uneasiness amongst parents who see this. They're not seeing the teacher training, everything else. And if we're going to have a transparent system where we recognize the parent's role in education, everything should be easily and readily available. I shouldn't have to guess and wonder what it means. It could be referred right back to. And so I'd like to see that, because I don't feel like it's reflected in the standards themselves.
Well, and it might be cumbersome to have like all the definitions in something like this, but could there just be a
That's
link?
what she said, a reference.
Yeah, and you just have it right there so that parents could have access to that. If you're wondering what the definition is, I think that would solve a lot of the problems or maybe concerns.
Right.
Yeah.
If I may.
Elisa, yeah.
So I also would like to see how this looks. We're starting from kindergarten. And in the older grades, it's a course where a parent can opt their child out. But what does it look like in the younger grades? Like, who defines what is appropriate or inappropriate touch, and is that in the reference document? You know, we're starting in kindergarten with some things, and then there's one that talks about, it starts with inappropriate and appropriate touch, and then it builds on to finding trusted adults. There's no mention of the family's role in that, in these standards. And so who are these trusted adults? And I just feel uncomfortable with the level of how much this builds on itself through every single grade in everything. And so what does this look like? Who gets to define what is appropriate, what is inappropriate, and is that in the reference document?
Does he need, would you like to come to the table? Please.
Scott? No, just kidding.
Please, come to the
Corby.
table.
Yeah.
Corby.
My name is Corby Easton, Student Support and Prevention Specialist. Part of the inappropriate touch is part of the child sexual abuse prevention training. It's required by statute for all school employee and provided by parents and also elementary school students as well. And that's statute.
Thank you. So again, if that could be referenced in these supporting documents so that people can see if
that's
there's
a good idea.
barometers on this, because a lot of people have different viewpoints or opinions on what is appropriate touch. And, and so I just think it's important if that is referenced so that people have a clear understanding of what is actually being taught. The vagueness of it without having these parameters leaves it pretty open to interpretation. And so I'd like to see.
Well, Carol. But my recollection is that different LEAs and different, even maybe schools within LEAs, of which there are almost 200 now, can choose different child abuse training programs.
Modules.
So not modules.
That have
They're
been vetted.
actually
But they probably follow a framework.
Do they follow? I thought they were.
Will they have to be vetted?
Yeah,
So-
but go ahead.
So we have it online, and Corby can speak to it more, where the board has the authority to then go through, and that's when Corby comes in, and he'll say, here's another one that's been vetted and will be on our list. And so then, once they've been vetted and are on the list, it's on a website, then those are the ones that the LEAs can choose from.
But that means though, and maybe what you're saying, Lisa, and this, man, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you want a reference to that list of possible child abuse trainings that various LEAs could choose from, but that doesn't give as much certainty to parents about which training program was
Right.
selected by the parents' LEA.
Yeah, I don't know because I didn't remember that.
Patty?
And can I ask a clarifying question, because this is a new way of thinking and doing with writing and being with writing standards. So in the past, and Diana, help me if I'm saying this correctly. So in the past, there's been the writing of standards, and then there's this supporting documentation that goes with it. So is the request that in the writing of the standards themselves, the supports are in there, or there's almost like a mirror document that here's the writing of the standards and here's the pieces that can support it along the way? Because if you look at some of the standards that have been written, Diana, do you want to I want to be able to see how you'd like that done. And as board members, what should that look like in the future moving forward?
Yeah, I think Patty said that right. There has been a conscious effort in the past to not put a vocabulary list or a glossary as part of it. So Jody actually has one prepared.
Yeah.
And I had her pull it off because we have not done that with our other standards. We separate those. And partially because standards are really difficult to change, and even through a board approval process, it's easier to change supporting documents. And so knowing that the existing standards are how old? 20 years old?
Over 20 years old for
You know,
elementary.
so because that glossary might need to be updated or revised, and of course it can always come back to the board every time, but we've kept those separate. Now, if you'd like them to come in parallel, sort of like we've been doing with some of the licensing things as two items, she could do that. She could bring that back next month if you were still willing to put the 90 days out and get that started, and then you could have a look at that.
If
And
you
then
had a
when we've
link,
been-
how hard would that be though, with the link to it? Because could you change the content of what's on the link without having to bring the standards back, or would it?
You could reference.
Like the reference.
Well, we
That's what
don't, we
it
don't
is.
normally do references and standards
Okay.
for that very
Okay.
reason.
For that
So
very
the
reason.
standards end
Okay.
up being
Makes
standing
sense.
on their own, and then there are
Okay.
the supporting documents
Right.
that teachers understand. I mean, that's part of what the specialists do, is help the teachers understand. So here are the standards, and here are the documents that help you implement the standards. And then just one other thing I want to say is to keep that separate from curriculum. So what
Yes.
Corby's talking about is curriculum that
Yes.
is approved, and the standards are agnostic when it comes to curriculum.
But I think, Elisa, you want to make sure parents can access that, not just teachers. Is
Yeah,
that what
well,
you're saying?
well, it's in this type of thing where it is so. Sorry, I didn't realize my sound was on. I always have it off.
Is that your alarm? Just
No,
kidding.
that was a phone call.
It's my alarm.
Let me just turn off the sound. But I'll have to think about the best way to do that. But I personally, as a board member, want to see them because I don't feel comfortable moving standards forward without knowing what you're defining things as. And so I personally would like to see them.
But there are so many.
Yeah.
That my concern is not just one link; it would be multiple
Yeah.
links, would it not? And then whoever's looking would have to find the right document among, depending on what her concern was.
We can redo that.
I don't know if anyone feels okay about, releasing for the 90-day public review, but asking to also have these documents brought back to us. Compiled. I mean,
it just feels.
That's the action we're looking for, is to release these for a 90-day review.
But it just feels like and maybe I'm kind of exaggerating in my head, but it feels like there are lots of documents that would be linked. Is that right?
And that's why we don't link them.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're not going to link
they're all on the
them.
website. We have things that support like core guides or, glossaries or resources, research,
Sure.
that kind of thing. I mean, there actually are lesson plans on UEN that
Uh-huh.
sometimes don't go through us and sometimes do.
So it's all on the website.
It's all on the website and it's all accessible to parents because it's public.
And see, for me, that's satisfactory.
Me too.
I want it to be available, but I don't, because I feel like there's so much change. I'd rather have something available than have links that have to be updated all the time.
And then
or
brought
ma-
back constantly.
Uh-huh. So
At
that's,
least
for me,
yeah.
that works.
Would you feel okay with having it go out for the 90-day review, but then being able to share some of the particular concerns as part of that 90-day review? Because the motion we're looking for is to.
Right. I am not comfortable with the way these are written as a whole.
So you don't even want to move them forward?
I don't want to move them forward. I would like to be able to go through because what I've seen in the past is we send things out for public review and we just end up tweaking a word here and a word there. And so this will end up being the framework of the standards. And I personally am not comfortable with it. I'm not comfortable with the amount of mental health stuff that is inserted throughout the document. I don't feel confident that we are adequately preparing teachers to take on that role at all. I don't have confidence in that. And so I'm concerned about that
Then
a
I
lot.
guess my question would be, do either of you have a motion to make?
I have a question about
Okay,
the motion,
question.
but I have
Okay.
a question to Elisa before that. So I'm trying to figure out what's going to be the end game, because there's not going to be anytime soon that teachers have the kind of training that they need to deal with the mental health challenges that are coming to them through their students in the schools. So
why are we entering into that realm?
Well, or the other question would be, it seems, so it feels kind of like an all or nothing. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I feel like it's either we ask them to do this stuff with the level of training we have because we know we need their help, because most children spend 6 hours a day in public schools versus fewer hours than that usually with parents, or we don't have that assistance from teachers. We use verbs that are less encouraging, and teachers are more conflicted about what they can say and not say, and we don't have that help from teachers because it's not like we're going to reach the point that you would like, which I would love too. I would love to require, 50 hours and pay for it of mental health training for every teacher, but we're not ever going to get there. So I guess I'm more comfortable with having them participate and help with some guidance than I am with verbs that discourage that or confuse them so much that it makes them reluctant to step in and be helpful. So with that, then my procedural question, do we need just 2 votes in this committee, a majority? It doesn't need to be, it's not like the board.
It's a simple majority.
So I would move that we start this with deference to some of what Elisa is asking for. I would love to look again at those words. I agree with you. I don't think argue is the best verb. But I also don't think linking every single document to the standards is reasonable, and even it's just not possible to keep it up to date, I don't believe. So I would rather see those documents available to parents on the website, by reference, something. But I would also like to see it. Now, I would love for you to give, and I did this with the licensing rule. I met 3 or 4 times with the people, and I gave them my written, not saying you have to, but that I think that helped make them more agreeable about the kinds of things I wanted. And I think that might help them work with you, because I agree with you on some of those verb concerns. So I would move.
Okay,
I didn't get to the end of my row, did I? So I would move that we do put these standards out for
After I say
public
the
comment
Okay.
with direction that with hope and encouragement for the staff to work with the league.
So we have a motion on the floor to move to approve the release of the health standards for the 90-day public review, but is there any public discussion? Come on up to the table.
Slide up here. So I prepared just a few notes on them. I don't know. These are just
Thank
some
you.
thoughts
Thank
and
you so much.
possible
She did my work for me.
Yes, this is very helpful.
So,
Thank you.
and then just a couple thoughts, and I think kind of what Elisa was saying about even that the standards should reflect clearly what the law is, that we shouldn't be questioning that, and I think if you were to attach something to the standards, I don't think it's every link or everything out there, but clearly the law, especially for the older, for the health standards in the older grades, it should be connected somehow to that law. And then I'll just give just a few thoughts. Number one, I just put that the instruction shall stress, it's clear in there, stress the importance of abstinence from all sexual activity before marriage and fidelity, after marriage as method of preventing certain communicable diseases. Anyways, I'm not going to read all of that, but then number 2 says demonstrate. I do know, and maybe someone from the health area here, up in our area, when they asked youth to do, it was alcohol prevention, they asked them to submit videos in order to, I think it was the health department that did it, either that or Empowered Parents, that kind of thing, coalition. They had very specific things they couldn't do. The kids could not demonstrate opening cans of beer and drinking it and others. There were things they couldn't demonstrate. But in here, we're asking the children or adults to demonstrate inappropriate behaviors when it comes to sexual activity. I've outlined those, standard K, H2. I just put be more specific. I had questions on that. Standard 1, standard 2, standard 6, and then the health 2. You're asking them to demonstrate and then work through those. And I could read one of those specifically if you give me just a second. Oh, sorry, I should give you this. I don't have another one, but I can set it there. So give me just 1 minute to look one of those up. So the question becomes, what does that demonstrate actually look like? Do the kids, are they trying to sexually get some, you know what I mean? What is that looking like? Demonstrate how to clearly say no, how to leave an uncomfortable situation, and how to identify trusted adults to talk to. So what is, I guess I'm wondering, what does the demonstrate actually mean? So, and I don't know if maybe there's...
I don't know, do you want to respond to that, Jody?
So these, I would like to remind the board, we had several teachers on this. We had elementary specialists, we had, so these words were, and I promise you, we went through so many words and so many revisions over, I mean, we spent a year doing this. But by no means is this is a draft, and this is what we're looking for is this feedback. We 100%.
So I just had wondered if it was.
But the word demonstrate would be perhaps, but perhaps not. Perhaps demonstrate means that they practice saying no, or perhaps it means perhaps it means that they write, or they could. It doesn't mean that they're face to face with peers practicing a behavior. Yes, Patty. Thank you.
The other day, we had this discussion, and I guess it was appropriate so that now I have this understanding. And Jody took us through kind of what one of the role play things is. And it's not the role play of I'm demonstrating touch. It's the fact that, and you want to do this really quick? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. She did this with Jeff. This is an example of the role play of saying no. So if you want to, so
I don't think I'm going to like it, but
no.
go ahead.
Okay. Let's see what happens.
I mean, you can show me, but
Jeff, could you be the other person because you were really good.
This is what I'm concerned that we're doing wrong.
So this actually comes from, this is part of underage drinking prevention, is how this conversation came up. And it's part of the Botvan life skills. It's one of the activities in middle school with Botvan life skills. So different conversation because that's not necessarily
But an
health.
example.
But this is where Patty's comment is coming from, is that within Botman Life Skills, they do, which again is for underage drinking prevention, not.
It's about saying no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what it is it's to practice saying no, but also accepting a no. Or saying yes and accepting a yes, or saying yes but. So that's, I can't do what you want to do, but here's another solution. So the example that we were doing was, Patty, would you like to go to the movies with me?
Consent, which
No.
is not in the statute.
So,
And then, oh, okay. So I have to practice understanding that she said no. And the difference, and refusal skills actually is in state codes.
I know
We have to
refusal
teach that.
skills is,
Yeah.
but when you're saying or yes, that could then be teaching consensual skills if you're saying, so that's concerning because that's not in. And I've seen some of the videos that organizations put out on consent, and as a parent, I'm not comfortable with them.
So that's just one of the concerns I have. Standard 2, I just had questions about in second grade, we're teaching including male and female anatomy. It's clearly a mixed group of grade 2. In many abuse programs that I'm familiar with, they refer to, especially at the younger grades, their private parts, not creating a focus on young age on drawing out or displaying human anatomy to young children. And this is second grade. There's not anything about it in third, fourth. Then when you get to fifth and sixth, of course, that's when we do the maturation and stuff. So that becomes more appropriate. So I just questioned why that was in there in second grade. Wording choice to avoid grooming behavior type of things. Identify trusted adults is the way it's worded. And I put including parents to talk with one is, and then the feeling uncomfortable about, if one feels uncomfortable about something. And in place of that, I would remove that and just put to talk with if one is being touched inappropriately or put in a compromising situation. We're leaving this if you are feeling uncomfortable. Well, in group behaviors, kids may not be sure whether it's, an if thing. Well, I don't know. Is that, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Instead of a clear cut, this is not appropriate kind of a thing.
I can tell you how that, if you would
Okay,
like,
sure.
if you would like a response.
Sure.
So with all of these, so the trusted adult was intentional, and yes, it would absolutely include parents most of the time. There are situations when the parent is the one, and that's why it wasn't including. If you have a student that is being abused by their parent, we didn't want the teacher to be saying, well, your parents are trusted. Most of the time, 100%, yes, they are. But sometimes they're not. So we didn't want to put that idea into students. As far as the uncomfortable, that was very direct from, we have specialists that they specialize in sex abuse prevention, and they were very strong about the word uncomfortable because it's not always touched. Sometimes that uncomfort is things that are being said or shown. So we wanted students to be able to report when things are not, it doesn't escalate as far as touch. So what are all of the things before? And we wanted them to be able to report on those things as well, and that's why it's anything uncomfortable to them. And maybe it's they don't like someone saying a certain word to them. They can now say, hey, I don't like it when you say that to me. But that's an uncomfort. As far as, and then...
So this is a very broad-reaching scope.
And may we go back to the second grade? I'm asking Corby back.
Let me just weigh in for a second. I think the discomfort or uncomfortable is broader than just the touch inappropriately or compromising situation, which I would think parents would want. I mean, we hear in professional practice cases over and over, they looked at me funny, which would be discomfort as well as touching. So I actually think the broader word is
well, and it teaches kids to trust
what we
their
want.
intuition, the feeling.
But that's just let's go on to, that's just sort of another opinion about uncomfortable.
Right. And we did have a really big discussion about the intention of it being uncomfortable. If you used Corby's expertise often on this unit with anything that had to do with sex abuse prevention. So if you allow, Corby can
Sure.
answer the question about anatomy.
Yes.
This is the second grade.
Correct.
Corby.
Yeah, again, my name is Corby Eason. I'm a student support and prevention specialist, oversee child sexual abuse prevention. A little backstory, if you go back to 50, I can give you the exact code, 53G-9-207. This was back in and this code is about child sexual abuse prevention. Is again required by all school employee. Is required by providing opportunity for parents to receive it and provide opportunity for elementary students to receive it. And so, for example, the bill required USBE, the health department, and other human health services to collaborate together and create minimum guidelines and expectation for each curriculum. And then once each curriculum had the opportunity to be vetted by an organized committee with those partnerships, and then the committee vet them, then it was brought to the board for board meeting to standard assessment, this committee to be approved to move forward to the full board for approval. So every program curriculum that is being used, it came through this committee and was approved by the full board.
So I'm looking at the statute you cited, and it says an elementary student may not be given instruction unless parent or guardian is notified. And so this is embedded throughout this, and so it would be a specific unit and parent notification would be sent out.
Yes.
Okay.
And it does, sorry, may I? It does say Utah code requires parental notification for instruction on sexual abuse prevention. It's directly.
Sorry, I didn't have it pulled up.
Yeah,
I was just asking.
I just wanted to clarify that for you. It's written directly above every one of those strands in each grade, so the teacher absolutely understands that they need to notify the parents of their students
So
before.
the second grade one will have a
Correct.
notification?
Yep, it's in there. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we, and I'm happy to show you.
That's all right.
Yeah, so it's just, if you just look at any of the HD, the human development sections, every single one of them has that line directly above it.
And Jody, it's okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, of course.
And Jody, do you feel like that's something that teachers understand? Do you think they, and then, candidly, do you think
Right.
that's something that teachers are very aware of?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you're out there doing the training, you're out
Right.
there.
Yes, I really do. I also do trainings with all district and charter specialists. I do them twice a year. So yes, I do. I feel very
Okay.
strongly that teachers understand what they have to do for this section.
Thank you.
I want to ask, is there anyone else from the audience that wants to come up and make a comment or has input with this situation? Oh, please.
My name is Mark Watterson with the American Heart Association. I was on the writing committee over this past year, and just due to the nature of the work that the teachers that were on that committee, they were unable to attend. So I know many of them were trying to reach out to board members through email and phone calls to try and express their feelings about the standards, and appreciate you coming together to give your, hopefully, the approval for these to go out for 90 days. Really just want to talk about my experience being on the writing committee and my appreciation for the expertise that was on there. We had in every single unit, we had high school teachers, we had middle school teachers, we had elementary school teachers that were able to give us great feedback as far as the content and whether it was appropriate for the age and their desire to really build upon the scaffolding structure that you see here. They love the fact that that's the new direction that the curriculum is getting from the board, because for them, they hated the fact that they were teaching the same thing over and over and over again. And in health, sometimes some of that stuff is actually needed. Like, I can't tell you how many times I have to tell my kids, you need to wash your hands all the time.
Yeah.
You know, health is a little bit different that way, because some of those skills, it's behavior, not just a knowledge or a skill of, 2 times 3 equals 6. It's, when we're getting into behavior, it's, okay, please wash your hands. But they really appreciated the scaffolding that comes through, and that they feel like this is allowing for them, especially when they get into middle school, they don't have to start at square one. So much of that has already been built in elementary school, to where they can actually teach new concepts and build the breadth of knowledge of the kids as they get into middle school, and then as they get into high school. So for me, I just really want to express my appreciation for the careful way that Jody has helped facilitate this writing committee, and how we've combed through state code to make sure that whether it comes to things like abstinence, or even new things like mental health, which were mandated by the legislature just this past session, that we are touching on those things in the appropriate grades and at the appropriate time. So, thank you.
Thank you. We probably have time for a couple more comments, and then we probably need to go
Can I
to
just
a
make
vote.
one more?
Sure, go ahead.
And then just
Yeah.
on the back end of it there, when it talks about define abstinence, and then it keeps referring to it as related to, in place of that, as it relates to pregnancy, abstinence as it relates to pregnancy, but in replacing that with the actual definition that's within the law, from all sexual activity, outside of, making sure it's within there. So if you wouldn't mind looking through those when you have time, I would appreciate that. So, and then it would further.
Carol has one
Is that it?
question
Oh, yeah.
related to that. Will you?
Yeah, I was wondering, Jody, if you can explain why it's as related to. Is there a reason, or?
So abstinence. So abstinence would be, so if we're talking about sexual activity, it would be vaginal, oral, anal intercourse. So all 3 would be abstinence. Pregnancy would only be one of those. When you look in the STD part, the other 2, abstinence prevents STDs.
And those things are detailed in the other document.
Correct.
Right.
That's what I'm looking
And that's what you want to see.
for. I want to see
This
a
is
clear
our standards.
definition in there.
Yeah.
I see now why, and that's pretty
Yeah.
dense for me, but thank you.
No,
For
that-
very specific.
Okay, and then,
explanation.
go ahead, Alyssa.
So I am, again, concerned with the way we do the revision process, and I might just put out a thing to revisit this. So the writing committee's formed, and the part that bothers me is they put in all this time, and then we don't see, they come and give us updates, but I don't actually see the standards. So then it looks like I'm just this mean old board member, and they spent a year, and I'm gonna rip it to shreds. Where if they would have brought us sections, and I know we were invited to things, I just couldn't ever make the dates because there was always
Yeah.
other things going on. It seemed like whenever the writing committee was formed, but even then I'm just a visitor.
Yeah.
This is our job.
Yeah.
Our job by state statute is to write standards, and I am not comfortable that we get these and then it's like, you're the bad guy because you want to throw it out with the bathwater and start over when this is our job. And so we need to have a more integral part as board members in actually getting there. And just having an update here and there isn't sufficient for me. If we had portions of the draft along the way, so it's not like you've spent a year and now I'm looking at the whole thing as a whole and going like this, when I could have told you that I was concerned with the word demonstrate months and months ago and not had to make you feel like I'm this mean old board member, because that's what it feels like, and it puts us in an uncomfortable position where we're now wasting taxpayer dollars because you've spent all this time and we have to go through and say all this stuff. I just feel like there has to be a better way to do this.
Can we respond to
Can
that?
Can I express a different point of view? Because I've been there. I have had things that are as important and immediate and personal to me as you're saying this was to you. And my feeling is that I would rather have, and took me a while to get there, I would rather have what I consider experts writing this. These folks have training in health education. They have training that I don't
had to write them.
No, but I would rather, and if what you're asking for is periodic updates,
Well, that's in here.
Where we can
but
have
what do they
discussion.
look? Yeah.
Yeah, but let me just finish my thought.
Yeah, and then I wanna ask Joyce something.
But I can understand that perhaps periodic updates, but I don't feel like you're a mean board member. I don't
No,
feel like
you're
I was a
concerned.
mean board member when I had to do the same thing with the licensing issues that came up over and over and over again. I feel like that is our job, but
Mhm.
I've also accepted that there are experts that write this, and then it's our role. I feel like then it is our role to intervene, to ask questions, to suggest alternatives. So, and I think I'm grateful that you
Yeah.
are willing to do that. And I don't see you as a mean board member, and I don't see you as a Johnny-come-lately. I feel like this is the point at which you should do this.
Right, but I still go back to, it doesn't have to be, you have so many comments. When I could have had one section, let's focus on the mental health section, bring that to the board, and then we can go through that one section. Then we talk about this, and it just, there has to be a better way.
Well, let me
in my
ask
opinion.
Jody, so in this whole process, this whole year you've
And
gone
it's
through,
open for it right here.
if a board member wanted to write you and ask about a certain standard or ask for input, could they do that?
Right, but we didn't know what they were.
Well, I mean, they were out there, she was sending updates.
Right, but not the actual standards.
But, Diana, please.
So,
Yeah, we're getting updates.
I would
little
really
brief.
like to think about a way that we
Yeah.
can keep the board involved.
That is
But
really
I
good.
also want to make the point that 2 weeks ago, the standards didn't look anything like they look today.
Yeah.
They changed so much during the process. And part of that is, Jody going to the teachers, and then the teachers say, oh, this, and then she's with the health professionals, and then they're, oh, this, and then she brings it to me, and I say, well, it has to match all the rest of the standards, so now you need to do this. And it's just like this constant
So that's
change.
why.
So
Right,
I
but
don't
we
think you
can-
should feel bad about
No.
having all this input right now. I don't feel like you're a mean board member.
Well,
because you have the
I
input.
don't have a pity party for me. I'm not. I just
Oh,
throwing
it's
out
important.
it. I was just
But
throwing out
this
here.
is the
donuts.
time to make
It
the
is.
changes. I mean, that's why we have the 90 days, and during the
Right.
90 days, I think Jody can be a lot more, oh, here's where we are. I mean, we can
Yeah.
have a lot more interaction with this committee.
Yeah.
In terms of like a month from now, what do they look like? Or
Okay.
here's what we're hearing, or whatever it is that you want to get that level of involvement. This 90 days is the time for that.
That's quite a
Yeah.
long time, I
What-
feel like.
And Alyssa, what would make you feel comfortable?
Well, I don't
to
know.
have
All I
during-
know is every set of standards that we've so far reviewed, I've felt the same, that
Yeah.
there has to be a better way to have a board member feel like they are more an integral part in this process, because ultimately it doesn't matter who was on the writing
Yeah.
committee. The responsibility lies on our head. I'm not saying I have to write it.
Right.
But the responsibility for bad standards isn't on their head, it's on
Right.
our heads.
Mhm.
We're the
We
ones
have
voting
90
for it.
days now.
Right,
And
and
would you
like
feel
I'm saying, I
comfortable-
don't feel like I've ever seen massive changes. Where again and again and again, it's always just another set of national standards. It just seems like in every single area, we just tweak a word here or there. And we're moving more and more towards this just standardized process where we look the same as everybody else. And
But this is the
that's
time
concerned.
to not just tweak a word, this is the time to actually make big changes
Right,
if
I
they
get
need
it.
to be, so.
So one more
Okay, go
question.
ahead,
Sorry,
Liz.
this is
No, you're
completely
fine.
different. And I had forgotten to ask this earlier. What standards were used as references for these? Did you guys sit down and just make these up yourselves, or did you follow
Yes.
something?
So we did look. We looked at Colorado, we looked at Idaho, we looked at Wyoming. I can tell you that none of these are their standards, though.
Okay.
We looked at them so that we had some ideas of what other things did. We also used ours.
Yeah.
Your old one.
But you
Yeah,
didn't
you
use
can see the
any,
crosswalk.
there weren't any organizations that have put out standards on, I mean, like
So
elements.
there are national standards.
Right.
We looked at, they have a summary document, but we used it just to see what's there. We didn't use it, though.
So you just looked at the summary.
Yep, and Mark can speak on this as well if you like, if you want to hear from one of the writing members.
I don't disbelieve
Yeah.
you, I just
Yeah.
want to know what you looked at so I can go
Yeah,
look at
so we
them.
did look, but we didn't, so we did use and we had them in some of our supporting documents, but these are Utah standards, 100%. We used Utah code more than anything else
Good.
that we've,
Yeah,
to create these standards. We used Utah teachers more than anything else. Utah Department of Health was they were some of our really good experts. But we had Primary Children's Hospital. They were a really big contributor, especially on the safety and disease prevention side. We had nurses, school nurses. Really, I truly feel strongly, these are Utah. These aren't Wyoming, these aren't Idaho, these aren't Colorado, they're not Texas, they're not California. They're Utah. We had teachers looking at other ones, more so for kind of words of, well, what are, and then it's, by the time we got to where we had a document that looked like this, we never looked at those again. And we turned them into things that we felt Utah students need.
Thank you. I don't know if Sherry?
Oh, no, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say we should vote, but.
Yeah, I was going to do that.
I just wanted to say something. Terry Shoemaker with the School Boards Association, Superintendent's Association. I want to express appreciation for the work
Yes.
that's been done. I hear what Alyssa's concern is.
Mhm.
I've heard it from parents too.
Mhm.
But I also know we have teachers out there waiting for this work to be done. And I hear a lot from them who are in that work. They're saying, can we not get something that we can use?
Yeah.
We've been using, how long's the old
20.
standards?
1997 for elementary, 2009 for secondary.
Okay, a long time. That's the challenge we have. And our culture, to some degree, is changing a little bit. Things change. Our teachers need to be able to reflect, not necessarily things that are bad that change with society, but things that are going to help our kids succeed as they interact with the world they're living in. And so bringing parents together and having the conversation about this is what this Utah value has always been, as I've understood it. Having them sign in to have the kids participate has been part of that value. That's important. That means mom and dad are saying, yes, yes, we want that. Or no, we don't want that. And we're going to do it. That's an important piece that it appears to be preserved with the standards as I was listening to you today. I just wanted to emphasize, I think we have both parents and teachers anxious to see this completed. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else before we? Okay, we have a motion on the table to approve the release of the health education standards for the 90-day public review, but I also think in that is to take the concerns as part of that 90-day review that you've heard here, and for us to offer that during the 90-day review. So all of those who agree with that? Yes? Those who are not in favor?
No.
All right, thank you, Jody. A lot of work.
And thank you very much for
Yes.
this.
Yes, thank you for this. too.
This is really helpful. I was finally making some sense of it.
I did. Okay, we are on to 3.2, digital teaching and learning, R277922. I think Sarah Young, you're going to talk to us about this. This is an updated rule to eliminate some redundancies and to align the programmatic requirements with the master plan. Sarah, talk to us about that and tell us what we need to know.
Thank you. So Sarah Young, Coordinator for Digital Teaching and Learning. So this rule is being brought to you actually in response to our last presentation to this committee last month in regards to taking a look at the rule and seeing if there are things that we could address within our kind of purview as State Board of Education, looking at the burden on LEAs associated with kind of the development of the plans. So you'll see that we have drafted some updates to the rule for your consideration. All of those updates are going to start in Section 8, LEA Plan Requirements, starting on line 115. So to give kind of the overview of what we have done, the biggest change to note is that we are shifting the language from it being a 3-year plan to it being a 5-year plan. So just to give kind of context for why that date range was selected, the master plan actually references a 5-year plan. So that was part of the original framework and vision that the program was built on. And so we have now shifted to that so that that's going to be the application round. We've additionally gone through and updated some of the language to reflect the current terminology within the agency. So prior to the board will reference SAGE, we have updated that to speak to statewide accountability metrics. In addition, we went through and removed redundant language. So there are a lot of items that were in there that were already captured in the master plan, which is referenced and included within this rule earlier. And so we just didn't feel the need that all of that language was there and present. So I'm happy to answer any questions or take any feedback about how we could improve upon this.
Okay. And before we answer, do you have anything to add, Jeff? Or are you just here to answer questions?
Just here to help and
Okay.
support Sarah.
Committee, do you have any questions?
I'm looking for, and you can maybe save me time, where the master plan is it incorporated by reference or just reference?
Yes. So in, I believe,
I'll do it later.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
so definition, but then
can just write.
there we are, incorporation in section 3.
And so line which?
34.
34
I
is where it
cannot
starts.
begin to see how that. I wish it were not so. Let me just see how it reads.
Yeah, I can't see that.
Oh, yeah.
But I
Oh,
don't want to
good.
lose my
Okay.
place.
The rule incorporates by reference Utah's master plan. Okay. And then I have a second. Maybe I'll wait on the second. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
So on line 123, where you've changed it from SAGE specific to an LEA growth or proficiency on the statewide accountability metrics, is that referenced in code that that's the measure we have to use?
So that is referenced in the original code. However, it's important to note that that's one option. The LEAs are also welcome to select their own measure, and both of those are present. We just wanted to make sure our reference to that language was accurate of our term.
Okay, so you have the other reference in rule as well for an LEA to.
Yeah, so the way we actually depict it is we call it kind of option A and option B in regards to this is the one that was presented in the code as a possible solution, but you're also welcome to choose your own, and we accept both of those. I will tell you most of our LEAs have started selecting option B just because of the nature and the precise nature of their plans is not going to be something that they think they're going to see outcomes, especially over 3 years in that large kind of state accountability measure. And instead they're choosing more direct benchmarks related to their curricular.
Where
science.
is that referenced in rule?
128.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I like that,
Thank
that
you.
they can do this or.
Right, I just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure.
No, I really like that.
And again, I'm being lazy. I could maybe find this
Oh, I see
approved
it.
by the advisory committee. Is that defined or?
It is. So the advisory committee is defined earlier
Go
in
up to
the rule.
the definitions.
And
I see it.
Yeah, the
Great.
individuals.
Thank you. I was just being lazy.
And they just make recommendations then that we bring to the state board, which is actually the next agenda item.
Okay. Let me ask
Any other
my,
questions?
just let me ask my other question, and this is just for your consideration. We talked yesterday, and the board agreed that we should add a sort of a revision or a new version of 495 of R277 495. Would this be a good place to do it, or do you think because this is a funding sort of rule, would it be better to keep those two things separate?
Yeah, so, you know, you made a comment yesterday that resonated with me in the fact that digital teaching and learning is a funding stream that not all LEAs will participate in for one reason or another. And so I think, especially in regards to addressing that concern and making sure that it's applicable to all of our K-12 system, having it be separate from this particular rule, I think would be best in recognizing it being all-encompassing.
Okay,
So
thank
it's
you.
everyone, yeah.
I think that's, I just feel so, I wouldn't have felt so strongly about that second part, except that I was all of a sudden given the responsibility to write a policy, and there wasn't a good, strong place to look for minimum standards. So that's, I was just asking that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from committee?
I move that we accept this rule as written on first reading and pass it on to the board for reading. Second reading.
Does she
Yeah.
need to
Second
specify the
final
rule
reading.
number?
Yeah.
She just
R277
The draft
dash
number.
9, yeah, draft
Draft
1.
one.
R277 dash 922, draft 1. approve on first reading and send to the board for second and final reading.
Any discussion or public comment? Okay, all those in favor say yes?
Aye.
Yes. Any
You're
opposed?
changing it.
I'm sorry, I like yes, but we can do aye, we can be pirates.
Aye.
Arr. All those in favor say arr. Just kidding. Okay, we will approve draft R277922 on first reading and forward for approval to the board on second and final reading. Thank you, Sarah. Wait, I think you
Yeah,
stayed.
you're next.
Sort of. So I am actually
Oh.
really excited that I am not presenting
Oh,
for the next
Sarah.
one. But instead we have Todd Call, who is our digital teaching and learning innovation specialist.
Yeah, he didn't mention that he's an innovation specialist.
Did
when we
he
went around the
not?
room. I was waiting for
He
that.
missed that. Okay, do you want to sit?
Okay, so we have our next is another action item. It's new plan approval for a digital teaching and learning qualified grant, R277922. Looks like we have some changes with money, etc., and we have some new applications. Todd, will you go ahead and talk to us about
Yeah,
that?
you bet. Good morning.
Good morning.
Todd Call, Digital Teaching and Learning Specialist with USBE, and I'm here to discuss the new plan submissions that were received for FY 2019. As Sarah alluded to, we have an advisory committee or advisory board of digital teaching and learning, and this year, as in previous years, we received several new applications for FY 19. And all of those applications were reviewed by this advisory board or advisory committee. And 8 of them, as outlined in board docs, were found to meet all required elements in board rule. And 4 of them submitted planning grants. So it's our recommendation that the board consider approving these LEAs as outlined, 8 for full grants and 4 for planning grants at the recommendation of the advisory committee for digital teaching and learning.
What about the one that didn't get a planning grant or approved?
Are you referring to an older list by
Maybe
chance?
I
We
am.
updated this morning, so
Okay.
I apologize, so
Oh,
I
no,
can
you're
give this
fine.
to you. We were working with LEAs and made an update
Oh, okay.
just recently. So
Okay.
8 full grants and then 4 planning grants are what we
Okay.
have from the advisory board today.
Any questions from the committee?
Yeah. I just have a question because in the past, some of our senators have been very vocal in disapproval of our approval for people that are getting grants, and I'm just wondering if you feel like measures have been taken to meet their expectations on how the code was written.
So yes, I will say the transparency component of the detailed dashboard, I think provides the accountability component that they were looking for. So in regards to the fact that that's a public portal that we have access to at all times and that we're constantly updating that, it really provides transparency. So honestly, that there's not just accountability here within this setting, but that there's public transparency accountability as well.
Thank you.
I have
Go
a
ahead.
sort of related question. Are there plans you don't approve?
Yeah.
I mean, is this one of those things that send it to us and we'll like it? Or is it,
No.
do you work with them then to improve it? Because I'm noting that these are all charter schools that are approved and one school district that is in the planning grant stage. So and a lot of those I would think would need help because they're smaller. So talk to me just a little bit about that.
You bet. So there are a number of elements that are outlined in board rule, and it's a very robust application for the LEAs to go through. And so the approach that we've taken this year and in previous years is that the LEAs have an opportunity to submit a draft application before the final submission date. And the advisory committee then is able to provide feedback and assist them before the actual final submission. So a number of LEAs took advantage of that this round and were able to receive great feedback from the experts that sit on the advisory committee and to help inform them before they submitted their final submission.
And so do you think the feedback rises to the level of technical assistance? Is that kind of what you do? You work with them actively? Is that how it goes?
Working with them actively, sure. So we provide feedback, and then they can reach out and say, here's the direction that our committee. One thing that's important to note is that the plans are being written by many stakeholders, and it's not one person writing the plan, which is a great part of the program. It's not only an IT director, but we see curriculum directors and superintendents and assessment directors and teacher leaders and so many others, and so there are many people working on it. So they have an opportunity to reach out and say, here's, in response to the feedback, here's how we have adjusted, or here's how we've better articulated. In a lot of cases, it's not a matter of them needing to really pivot and change as much as it just isn't clearly articulated in their message. And so they re-articulate or make adjustments to ensure that their vision is very clear in the direction they're trying to go.
Thanks, that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I move that we accept these or approve these recommended plans to go forward. I mean, I think, do they go to the board also? And go to the board then for further review.
Okay, motion on the table is that we approve the new LEA plans for digital teaching and learning qualified grant fiscal year 2019. And it doesn't say move to the full board, but I'm assuming we do move to the full board. Any discussion or public comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you guys so much.
We can say yes too.
Next time we're going to say yeah.
Just change it every time.
Yeah, I will. Oh, you wait. Okay, our next one is an information item. I think, are we going to do the science standards update?
Yeah, and look, he put the standards in there. Thank you.
Because
he always gets negative feedback from me because I'm not a national science standard fan. But look, you put him in here. Thank you.
Okay, we have Ricky Scott, and he's going to tell us where we are in the process. Talk to us about where we're heading, what we can expect, next steps. And he's always so excited about science.
So excited.
I spoke too soon there.
I know.
They're not the actual standards. I was looking at it wrong.
I was going to say.
That would be awesome if there were some in here.
So, Ricky Scott, K-12 Science Specialist for the Utah State Board of Education, Teaching and Learning. Since we last met, we have kind of moved in that flexible steps 5 through 7 range of this process, in which we're just giving updates to the process. Since we met last, our writing teams have come together. They've worked collectively on the drafting of standards. They specifically, based on, again, the direction that was given to them from both the State Standards Review Committee as well as this board, they were given direction to look specifically at our current standards, NGSS, but also multiple standards. I've listed the ones they've looked at specifically. Pretty much in that first meeting day or two, they looked really closely at the research around it, looking specifically at three-dimensional science based on what is described in the research that controls, or controls, but supports improved science education. And they were given some direction from that point to work into smaller groups based on their grades, and they kind of individually were drafting kind of on their own in that month period specific assigned areas. So they were kind of on their own, spent that next month drafting and kind of putting together their plans of what they thought. So that was kind of the first set of meetings for all of them. That led about a month later, and just here in this last September, where they all got together. They kind of came together, they showed each other what they came up with, and they tried to see what do we like, what do we don't like, kind of giving feedback, but that was still specifically within both a grade level and a grade band. So again, that's kind of the process so far as far as it's gone. The drafts still aren't 100% completed. The next step, as it describes in the back, is that kind of the leaderships are coming together. So in each of these grade bands, we have a K2 grade band, a 3-5 grade band, and a 9-12 grade band. So in each of these 3 grade bands, there are people whose job it is specifically, and this is just how they've organized it. I kind of like, how do you want to do this? What's the best way from what we learned from 6-8? And their job is really to look at this coherence and cohesion between these documents, because they're being written so independently from these different groups and as we kind of come together. So the next step is to get the leadership together, try to put a coherent document together based on what was put together, and that's kind of where we are. We're really excited in the process that it's gone. We've looked, like I said, a lot of this other states and see what they've done. We specifically looked at some of the ones on that Fordham list and see where they were. We looked at some that have used NGSS and adapted. We looked at some that completely did not look at NGSS and what they did as far as using a three-dimensional format as described in research. And so anyway, so there's been a lot of kind of inputs coming into this. But that's pretty much where we are. The hope, if all goes well, is that we could potentially have a draft to the board by either the November or the December board meeting.
Okay. So that would be like step 8 in November?
if all goes well, again, we don't want to rush anything. Yeah, exactly. We don't want to rush anything. So if they feel that they have put together a document that is coherent, and I'll let you know also what we want to do really to make sure it's really clear.
Yeah.
Is we're going to have kind of 2 documents submitted to the board when that comes. The first one is going to be just the draft that would go out as part of like the document that is 90-day review.
Yeah.
But then we also have kind of a spreadsheet that these writers have been building along the way that's like, here's the standard we got it from, here's why we did what we did to it. I mean, just try to make it as clear and open as possible. I think that's what board member Lisa Cummins was requesting too. Like, give us a feedback, where is this coming from? Because I remember last time with you and I, when we did 6-8, it was kind of like, well, look at these comparisons. So we want to put it all out there. Here's where we're going, here's what's coming from, here's what we're changing, and here's the rationale. And here's why we've left things where they are, or here's why we completely scrapped that and went in this direction.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So.
Did you have a question?
Well, he answered my question, so
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to ask when you know, where you pulled them and different things like that. So I would really appreciate that document.
Right. And again, so the hope is that when we send out to 90-day review, we'll reference it. If you remember how we did last time, there was like an introduction page to like, here's where you get to the online review, and here's some resources. We'll kind of put it in there. Well, we kind of like what happened with Jody. We want the standards document itself to stand alone. It's like, here are the standards, but if you want to see where they came from, click here and go to it. So there'll obviously be public documents for everyone to see.
Good.
Right, and I haven't seen them, but the health standards seem a little bit unique in the definitions compared to other. My mind went blank, other standards, but I was thinking subjects.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I think that I don't know that the definitions matter as much, but I would like to see where they came from and how they were informed.
Perfect.
Well, I will have you know that I took a science test.
Oh, I did.
7th grade. I think I got about 3/4 right, because it's a lot of literacy. It's a lot of reading. And if you can read.
I got there after. I couldn't take the whole test. I only got to question 1, so I signed a non-disclosure for 1 question.
But I have to tell you, I really had
you're referring
weirdly fun with it.
You're referring to, so you went to what Darren was discussing last night. So that's right. So we looked at the standard setting. That was really exciting, actually, to be able to get the teachers, because a lot of them haven't been able to go. I mean, they don't get to take the test, so to let them go through it multiple times. Anyway,
and as a board member, it's hard to get away from my teaching job, but it would be fun to be involved in more things like that. So anyway, thank you for doing that. Any other questions, either from the audience or committee? Okay, thank you so much for that information, Ricky. Okay. We're on item 3.5, underage drinking prevention program. Jeff?
Yes.
And Rhett Larson. So 53G 10406 makes rules establishing the criteria for selecting a provider.
Put in the law in here.
Oh, I know. I like when you guys do that. This is I know.
Good.
And it said in here in the background, it said 7 and 8, but I think it's 7 or 8 and 9 or 10.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and I was going to make that announcement as well. Yes.
Well, I just wanted you to know that I read it. And this rule is being made to comply with statute, and so go ahead and talk to us. This is an action item.
So I'll go ahead and start, and then I'll jump over to Brett. So this rule is a new rule, but it is required by statute, so we don't have a lot of choice with creating it. That being said, statute requires that you list the criteria that you use to hire the provider for the program. And with the RFP that had already gone out, that was a very easy portion of this rule, right?
Yeah.
I just took what you guys had voted on as a board last fall. And then the second part is you have to require in the rule that LEAs offer it to 7 or 8 and 9 or 10. So we put that mandate in, and then we also added a reporting requirement element in here for LEAs so we could gather data in the anticipation of the legislature asking at some point. And it is at this point that I do want to point out, because Terry Shoemaker is not here, when we review the rules with the Superintendent Association on Wednesday, he did point out concerns about the reporting requirement.
Yeah.
With the concern, this is yet another report. And I did also want to point out, I used the word on line 46.
Is that in statute? Sorry, the requirement to
It
report.
is not.
Okay.
Statute does not require the reporting. And on line 46, I used a very loaded phrase, so I apologize. I said opted out, which is not what I meant to say. Because right now, the way this course is working is most LEAs will offer it through their health course. And with the way that graduation requirements work, you could fulfill the requirement that HELP fulfills by never taking HELP.
Yeah.
And so one of the data points we were going to be curious about is which students would never enroll in the course where this is offered. So opted out really should say enrolled, and I would definitely, if
Okay.
we keep that line in, entertain an amendment from the committee to change that to enrolled rather than opted out.
Okay.
But I did want to make sure that Terry Shoemaker's concerns were out there,
Good.
that another report is a concern, and Rhett and I have had a good conversation, and maybe I can pass it over to Rhett to kind of address some of those concerns.
Absolutely. So, good morning. Rhett Larson, Substance Abuse Prevention and Intervention Specialist. And so when we look at this, it's more than just a presentation or curriculum that's being taught. We're talking about targeted prevention. And yes, there's the concern with the amount of funding that has been provided here. In 5 years from now, when the contract is up, having to report back to the legislature what we have done and what difference it has made. But looking at the targeted prevention and data, they go hand in hand if we want to see if it's actually making a difference. And with this data, it can also be universal in looking at other prevention. So for example, Botvin Life Skills, in addition to the evidence of decreasing underage drinking, has also research in showing that it helps with some really hot topics that we're hearing about right now, like marijuana, opioids. Also, it helps with decreasing violence. And also, I think it may help us in our suicide rates here in Utah. And so in looking at, that's one of the reasons, and I have been mindful of not wanting to just ask for another thing for LEAs to have to report on. But I really think as we talk about prevention and the importance of data there, and looking at this data piece of those students who were given this curriculum, what does that look like in also, in not in just underage drinking, but those other universal prevention efforts? And so I feel like for us to be able to speak to monitor, to inform to this prevention, we need to have data.
And will that data be able to take into account those other things? Like, will we be able to look at like life skills in terms of, like you said, violence, marijuana, et cetera?
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any questions from committee?
So when you were talking to the superintendent, Terry Shoemaker, Superintendent's Association, and you explained what you just did, which was helpful, Rhett, to see why that was, why that's a report that if we have to report to the legislature, we have to have some information to report to the legislature, which we can only get from LEAs. When you just explained that to Terry, was he sort of more agreeable, or?
So I took Terry's concerns to Rhett after the meeting, so we haven't had a chance to discuss
to go back with Terry. Okay.
Rhett's points with Terry specifically.
As sympathetic as I am to that, you need data to take to the legislature, so I don't know how you would get that. I would just, and I was looking at this quickly, the reporting requirements, and it doesn't seem particularly, I know it's another report, but it seems about as minimal as you can make it. I would make an amendment that on lines 45 and 46, 7, 8, and grades 9 or 10 respectively, who were enrolled in the course, does it need to be in a certain year, or can I just say enrolled in the course?
7 or 8, it's already 9 or 10.
So just changed, so delete opted out and enrolled in the course where underage drinking prevention program was offered.
Okay, discussion of the motion?
Who did not enroll?
Did not enroll. I wondered if you were trying to make a positive instead of negative. But you still want to say who did not enroll.
Versus
opted
out.
Oh, go ahead.
You have a lot of online or distance learning type of situations where they don't have a health class that this curriculum would be integrated into. And so I'm concerned about putting in language that is so narrow and focused that it doesn't leave open room for those that are not in a situation where kids are taking a course, but can this be offered as a curriculum set, because it has to be offered where someone may just post this on their website or whatever it is, and offer it to the students as a course that they take independently with their parents. Because I was sent some pictures of some curriculum. Did we create statewide curriculum, or as I'm reading this rule, it looks like each LEA would put out an RFP process for their own, or is it a statewide?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
And
it's-
can we get a copy of that? I've only had pictures that someone sent me.
Copies of what? I'm so
The
sorry.
curriculum that was created.
The Botman Life Skills?
Whatever this underage drinking and
Yes, the
prevention
Botman Life Skills. I have a copy upstairs. I'd be happy.
Can we attach it digital, please?
No, it's very, the
Can you spell
curriculum.
out Botman?
Botvin.
Oh, it's too big to attach. You don't have a PDF version?
Of the entire curriculum? No, it is very large.
It's just a physical?
Mhm.
You don't have a digital copy?
Correct.
Well, what can we do about that for people that are?
Yeah, your concern is what about people who need to
Right.
do it through distance learning or online or want to do it through
I would be
parents?
happy to check with Botmans to see if that's an option, if they have it digitally. I would imagine that they do, but I
Right, they
want to
have to
check
print it.
with that first. Because in speaking to the online, there are, for online-only schools, they have online curriculum available, and so I'm sure we could, look at posting that. And they're currently working on making it possible for high school online.
Oh.
Sorry, you have public comment.
Oh, yes, please come up to the table. Tell us who you are.
Joylyn Lincoln with Utah Association of Public Charter Schools.
Okay.
And we also were concerned on the reporting elements.
Okay.
It has just a few, but D on line 49 is relevant end of the year. That makes it very open-ended, and the amount of data that could be gathered when we start talking about marijuana, opioids, violence, and suicide, that's well beyond just underage drinking prevention. And we're wondering if this simply couldn't just be put in an assurance that yes, it was taught in the assurance reports that schools fill out, so that it isn't an additional report. Also, to find out if the program is working, can't we just look at state statistics on did underage drinking go down? Would that show relevance to the program over a 5-year program without being labor intensive on LEAs?
Could either of you respond to that?
So we do have, you guys may recall the Rule 108, we had it just continued not too long ago and made some changes. The assurances document. So there is an assurance document that every LEA has to fill out that is probably 25, 28 pages long of did you do X, did you do Y. They have an option to post links for certain policies they may be required to have to prove they did it. So this definitely could be added to that document. Did you offer and which course? That would help us with making sure that the statute was complied with.
Yeah.
I think the concern still lies with if the legislature wants to know, well, how's it going? How many students took it? How many teachers did you train? We won't have that data if we don't collect it. And I don't know if maybe we put that in the assurances document.
I just hate having a second additional report where, with relevant end of the year, that could become a very lengthy report. We can't tell on this document.
But if it was included in that document.
If it's just like in the assurances, 2 more lines, it's already one report. They know when to turn it in. I mean, if you look at the reporting calendar that districts or LEAs have to fulfill, it's like a 4-page document of when different reports are due, and there's multiples. If we could simplify the life of administrators at LEAs
There's
by
no such
putting it
thing as
in the
simple.
assurances, instead of having additional reporting, it would make life easier for both districts and charters.
Is that possible? Is it doable? What do you? Oh, Darren, please come.
I was just going to say, as I look at it, and having been on that other end and having to complete those reports, if your interest is just knowing how many students in each LEA participated, which it looks like that's what you're getting at, once you know which courses it's offered, LEAs are already submitting through UTREX their enrollments tied to those courses, and if it's important, somebody at USB could harvest that, and then you would know the numbers by LEA of students who've participated in that
That's a really good
curriculum.
idea.
That's a great idea.
I think it's, thank you for that. Lisa.
Sorry, you can finish this discussion because
Yeah.
mine's a different topic.
That's all that I have.
And see, my concern is I've been on that hot seat talking to the legislature where they want data about in detail, and I'm so sympathetic to Joylyn's point about multiple reports and multiple dates for those reports. But I've also been in the hot seat when they've expected us to be able to tell them how many students took the course and what kind of training the teachers got, and I know that's not exactly what is required here. but I want to make sure that we get the information you need, so you're not scrambling a week before an interim committee because suddenly the legislature lists 10 things that it wants, and now you're trying to contact LEAs and you don't have a baseline report. I also want to point out that it says relevant and end-of-year data as prescribed by the superintendent. So she would know, she could, after some time spent with this, she would know if there would be one more item on it or 3 more items on it. It's not, I don't think it is completely open-ended. She could assign you folks to keep that narrow. But so I just want to make sure, Darren, in doing what you're just proposing, because I don't like, you feel so uncomfortable and so foolish, and I know the competing concern.
Joylyn, go ahead and respond.
I just think too, a lot of that data is available that somebody could pull ahead of time. We already have statistics on underage drinking rates in our state and across the nation. We'll be able to pull from UChecks the number of people that took classes where it was offered, and we have assurances marked by the number of schools that did offer it. So I think you would be able to pull the statistical data that you need. It may be a slight more cumbersome on one person here at this office to do that versus somebody at every single LEA. So I think financially responsible to pull the data. One person here's days worth of work versus an hour at every LEA. I mean, the math says it would be easier done in an assurances with data you already have.
Would that give us what we need?
Yeah, so I appreciate this conversation a lot and hearing everyone's feedback on this. And as we look at data, so let's look at the SHARP data, for example. I know not every student fills that out. So when this is going to, each student every year, I want to make sure that we have full relevant data. My concern is when we go to the legislature, I don't want to lose funding for this prevention program that's affecting students. And so that is my biggest concern. Is I want to have enough, and that's what would be on my, in looking at relevant data and all, and I know that is open-ended, but it is up to the superintendent. But with that, I just want to make sure, again, when I'm in that hot seat, that I have what I need to present to them, because they will come after us at USBE for that information, not the LEAs.
They'll cut the funding. That's what they'll do. They won't ask questions. They'll cut the funding.
So I guess the question is, will you have what you need if you do it through like an assurance document or?
No, you.
I'm
just reminding you, I've got like.
No, we know.
I'm sorry.
I just don't want us to change if, like,
I was thinking of 2 ways of doing this. I was thinking, on the one hand, leave it this way for a year and see what you get, or I was thinking, add it to the assurances document and see if that's sufficient for a year and see what you don't get or what you might still need. So that then, but that would call for all 3 of you folks to kind of keep it in the front of your brain.
Would that be possible?
I'd rather do the second. I'd rather do the second, where we do the assurances, see how that's working.
And isn't that what you
I said one or the other.
Okay.
And one or the other, and make sure for a year that you have it. But I just,
you want to make sure the program continues.
I can't say enough how hard reports are for LEAs. I know that, but I also know the other side of it, that we can't expect funding from programs that we don't have adequate data for. So I would go either direction. If Elisa, if you want to make that motion,
are we ready for a motion?
Just on that.
We can do that and then discuss.
On that particular.
I don't know if we need. Do we have to make a motion to amend that? Well, let's talk about it a little bit more, because I'm also not comfortable.
Okay.
Well, I guess this would strike it out. I get that in this office when we put the State Board of Ed in rule, we ultimately are assigned the superintendent. But what I'm uncomfortable with is when we just have the superintendent, time after time, I get notified of things that never came to us because it's defined as the superintendent's responsibility. Then we get things that people expect us to know about, and we have no clue what they're talking about. That's similar. I'm concerned with the statute that Patty's on the UETN board, and because the statute's written that the superintendent assigns it, like, it never had to come to us at all. And I don't have a problem with Patty being the person there, but it's just, you know, as elected officials, it's embarrassing when people come to us and we're just like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because we don't.
Yeah, and I feel a little differently. I feel like
Well,
the
but it
staff-
depends on, because I've seen you when you're passionate about something, you do care about
Yeah,
it.
well, I
Yeah,
don't.
no, it's true.
I do care sometimes, but
A
I guess
lot.
I guess
Care.
we have to all agree to that. But
It just depends on the issue.
I can't agree that it's always the USBE because I think that we need to.
Well, of course, that's what I'm saying is at least then.
So how do we choose?
I don't know. But we can
That's
take
the
it out if we can take it out completely if we do the second option, and then we don't
Well-
have to worry talk about that right now.
And I think Patty brought up a good point. I think we need to remember that, especially where this is a new program, it's really important for us to establish really good baseline data. And so we might want to err on the side of a little too much. I don't know. Have you guys think like a little more data the first year? I don't know.
I'm more in favor of the recommendation by the
Just an
public.
idea. I just wondered what you.
So this is my before we make that amendment.
Yeah.
Is this what it is? Because I got someone sent me these. Is this the table of contents?
You know, I
for
don't
that?
have that, this looks like it, but I want to make sure I have it in front of me to
do
confirm
you?
that.
Well, because I mean, when we're talking about underage drinking,
Oh,
and
look at you.
There you go.
I
We
was
don't.
upstairs.
Yeah, so we don't even get to underage drinking until table of content. I'm getting old. It's like I got elected and
Do you need
my
my
eyes
glasses?
disappeared.
Yeah.
So we don't get to alcohol until page 36, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th content area. So how in the world did the RFP create this life skills class, marijuana, drug abuse? I mean, I care about all that stuff, but that's not what the law says.
Right.
So the underage drinking, so the evidence is on the underage drinking with Botman Life Skills Training, and we're talking about life skills in general, of helping them learn how to cope, how to communicate, how to assertively stand up for themselves, or how to be assertive, how to stand up
Yeah,
for
but the
themselves.
statute said underage drinking prevention program.
Yes, and so the life skills, learning those life skills helps students in doing that. Because when you look at why do students turn to drinking? So we're trying to look at why is it that leads them to those choices of those things. And so it's giving facts, but it also, majority is teaching those life skills of helping them so that they're able to more fully do that. Does that make sense? And the evidence is in helping bring down the underage drinking.
Like to
Yeah,
just
but-
talk about drinking, the
Well, and
research
you're-
says you need this other stuff too.
And you're inserting that all of this is not a standalone course, it's going to be embedded within health?
No, it was chosen, LEAs get to choose where they want to
Where to
implement
put
this
it?
program. Yep, it's local control on that.
So they could
Most have
be-
chosen health as it aligns with health standards.
Right.
But it could
Sorry.
it also be in a?
Oh.
But it also yeah I just
Yeah, you go and then come
But
up.
could it also be in a?
I mean, I care about
It
all
could
these
also be
things,
in one
but-
of those. Oh, I'm trying to think what they're called.
Teen living or
preparation for life kind of classes that are becoming quite
Right, but
prevalent.
that's,
in
I
Salt
guess
Lake
it is
District.
offered to all students, but you'd have
But
to
not every student takes it.
Well, not every student takes
Uh-huh.
any of these, but
Yeah.
but you'd have to specify to be compliant with the statute that it exists within this, or else you could be accused
It has
of
to
not
be
offering.
exist within a required course is what.
No, no, the statute doesn't say it has to be. It just has to be offered to every student.
So the statute does say that the provider has to give a program that is evidence-based and aligns with current Utah standards. So it did need to align with standards offered in some course as required by statute, which is why it ended up being written that the RFP was written to kind of look more toward the health standards because it seemed to be the most logical place where these things would come up.
Okay.
The statute does require that. And then the RFP process, we did require, one of the most weighted criteria was evidence-based because that's what the statute required. And Botman Life Skills was actually the only applicant that met that criteria.
And it'd be 1,100.
So at the end of
wow.
the day, this was the only course that even met the RFP that was aligned with the statute, if that's helpful for context.
Right.
Please come to the table.
I just
Or-
wonder if it was
or
written in a way
Just
to
a quick
select a
question.
certain
So,
provider because that
Does
happens.
the LEA responsible to teach the whole
Sometimes.
2,
Better
3
go.
binders or just this section on the underage drinking?
Well, see, and that was my concern because that looks like more than
That
3
looks like
days.
that's gonna take.
I have had a
the
health teacher
in
come to me
is
and
like
say,
going,
how do I do that
That's a
with all
that's
the
what I
others?
asked.
with the teaching instruction.
Yeah, that's
So-
more than 3 days or.
To keep with the fidelity of the
Mhm.
program and the research that shows that it decreases
Yeah.
underage drinking, it's taught sequentially and in order. And so there are, depending on the grade level, certain amount of lessons that are taught, and it
Yeah.
has to be done with fidelity. But all that research and evidence is done collectively,
Uh-huh.
not just pulling out one lesson, because then we would be talking about a one lesson, not necessarily a program.
So how many days is that?
It depends.
Yeah.
They have their so what happens is in the training,
Uh-huh.
the BOTVIN trainer will ask each teacher, are they on semesters, are they quarterly,
Yeah.
are they, and what that looks like, and then how many times they get the student, how long each class is, and they all go down and they write down on their lists, and they get to choose whether they want to teach this, every day for 2
Okay.
weeks, or if they want to choose
Okay.
to teach it one day for how many weeks it is to complete this curriculum. It just has to be done sequentially.
But they cannot pick and choose, because that changes the fidelity of the.
Yeah, whether they want to do it this
Uh-huh.
now or in 4 weeks from now,
Yeah.
yes, it does have to be taught in fidelity. That is
Okay.
correct.
All right. One more question and then.
I'm sorry, I'm just concerned what you're asking teachers to do, because now you've got a health class and we have standards that we just looked
Yeah.
at in item 1, and the standards are this, and now we have this whole life skills thing that's this, and that's just asking a lot of teachers.
So Jody Kaufman's going to come and talk about that, but I have, like, the health teacher at my school, she was concerned immediately because, but I guess, an LEA could decide to do a whole year course in health. Like, there are some options there. Anyway, so we'll wait for Jody Kaufman, but go ahead,
So
Brett.
I want to after you because you raised
Okay.
your hand. So go ahead and then I'll.
Well, I
after
just
you.
I just keep going back to this. It doesn't say in statute that it does it say it's in statute that it's required to teach an underage drinking program. It doesn't say that it's required to teach the whole thing as a whole in statute. You're saying you would like to see that happen, or that. Right? I mean, so, I mean,
It says it
I'm
has to be a research-based.
Research and
Yeah.
the program that was selected, that's how it's taught.
Okay, and I still go back to, I think that LEAs should have the option to not just decide to put it in a health class, but also just as as a standalone thing that's available for people online if they choose. It doesn't have to be teacher-led or anything. It could be parent-led, where you have this online option. If they choose to do it, it's there. That way, I don't know.
But we don't know if BOTVIN offers an online course.
Well, I think that they're going to have to. We have a lot of online-based schools, and if statute says that they have to offer it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
do
that's
we
true.
send every single student all in the whole state? That's a lot of money to send them all of this material if they choose to take this course.
Mhm.
I mean, I just think that they're going to have to. That's going to have to be
Yeah, how do we offer it on
renegotiated.
an online school?
And we would need to figure out in the original RFP if we requested the vendor to also have it online when we paid out the fee for it.
Right, and
So
that,
we can check on that, right?
yes.
Jody, so the concern is, how do you get this into the health curriculum? We just talked about health standards. Is
so-
this possible?
Yes.
Okay.
We did.
Wow, okay, you go now.
Okay,
Just kidding.
With the current standards,
Yeah.
because that's what we have, we created a crosswalk that
Great.
shows the teacher which standards each lesson would cover for them.
Okay.
And every lesson in the BOTVIN Life Skills has a direct correlation to the current standards in middle school and high school.
The current standards or our revised ones that we're
Current.
going out to send out?
Current.
Have you compared it to the?
When we were writing, we did look, but this is a curriculum and it doesn't have to be in health class.
Yeah.
So we did look to see that it could still work,
Mhm.
but we didn't use BOTVIN Life Skills to write our standards.
Well, I know,
Right,
but I'm
right.
just wondering if it would fit in.
It
if these
still
were-
would.
But you could do
because
that.
the same, so there's communication as part of BOTVIN. We still have communication in our
Mhm.
standards. Peer pressure, we still have peer pressure. Some other, there's optional violence lessons.
Mhm.
That's something that isn't quite as, there's still healthy and unhealthy relationship. Violence isn't so prominent in the proposed draft of our new standards. But there is absolutely still correlation, and if the new standards and when they do go through, we will create a new crosswalk for the health teachers, because we know that of the almost 500 teachers that were trained, the vast majority were health teachers. So we know that, and I get phone calls all daily, and I get emails daily for teachers. I've also asked for feedback as well from the teachers. How is it going?
Yeah.
Because I would like to know. I would like to know how it's going. But I will create a new crosswalk whenever that time is that we have new standards. We'll create a new crosswalk for those health teachers so they can see as well.
And health teachers have been trained, or will be trained on this?
Yeah.
Like,
almost 500 of them.
I was going to say, I know those in my district have already been pulled in and they've gone through.
I'd like to see this because I'm just cracking up, given the politically charged place we are at right now, emotionally charged, the marijuana myths and realities, marijuana fact sheet. I'm like really anxious and curious to see what that looks like, given that just seems like.
I would be happy to let you. I have a copy. I'm happy to let you take it.
Right. Well, I just am curious because people see that in the title, and I'm sure there's a lot of people with a lot of different opinions on that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brett.
So we've trained, as of this last training, 548 teachers. And coming on board to the agency in June, one of my worries was, what is that going to look like requiring this for teachers? I was a teacher myself, I know what that feels like.
Yeah.
And as they come into the training, there is that hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
There's that,
Yep.
and I respect that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the training, I have made an effort to ask teachers what they have thought. And there's been positive responses
That's
as
what I
to, there is what health teachers are teaching, but now it's giving them evidence-based strategies to do so. And I'm happy with that, been happy with the response, and I just wanted to answer your question, if that's okay, with regards to online. So there is currently, on the RFP that was sent out, online was not in there with regards to online programs. Botvins themselves, they do have the middle school curriculum that's available, and they're working on high school to help meet Utah's need. And so I know they're working on that, and that was one of my first questions coming on to this project is, what about the online students? And that is on my agenda and my radar, but I do not have concrete answers.
Okay. So my second question is, I received this from an online provider who's, saying the district sent this out, telling us we have to offer it, but there's not a mechanism for that to be available. So I think that the responsibility lies on us to give an exemption until we figure out how that's going to work for our online charters or any type of online program, because how do they offer it to all the students unless we're willing to spend the money to physically send all of these to each home?
So that right there that you have is a copy of middle school, which there is online middle school.
There is online middle school.
Yes, this right here is teacher curriculum. I don't know if it's in here. This right here is the student
So we do have it
manual.
available for the 7th and 8th grade offering,
Yes.
not the 9th and 10th grade.
Correct. And this is the student manual, and in that funding, we do pay for every student in 7 or 8 and 9 or 10 to have one of these manuals.
Oh,
And so we would do the same for online
So they
students.
can.
That's what the funding is for.
Well, right, but if
How do
if
we
they
get it
choose
to
to not embed that within the health curriculum, I still think that this should be available as a standalone. If we have to offer it, it doesn't have to be embedded within another course. You can take this course as a standalone course.
But an LEA could choose that.
An LEA could choose that, but in your online schools, it would be really easy. And even a student that's a full-time in-seat student can still take online driver's ed or other things, and so they could choose to just take this if they want, and you're still offering it to all of them. And I think that should be an option. I would like to see that as an option available, because technically you're meeting the law that it's offered, and then they can choose whether or not this is something they want to do. It's a lot more difficult when courses are embedded within another course if someone chooses to not take that offering, because now they're having to say, I'm going to pull my child out of this discussion and this discussion and this discussion, whereas we're just required to offer it, and it could be put on there.
Can I just ask, because I have a clarifying question for that, and my apologies.
Yeah.
But when we're offering it, so I feel like then we would be changing the local control there, right?
No, I'm just saying offer. They can do both, but we should put that out as a option for people to choose. It doesn't have to be embedded within another course.
You just want it to be a standalone online course.
Or they can choose to do it too, but it seems like right now we're pushing more for it to be embedded within another course versus offering it as a standalone.
That's what LEAs have chosen. They can certainly offer it as standalone, and we would train, as far as we're concerned as the agency, we would train them. It's up, but the LEA still has that choice now to do that as a standalone. It's them who have chosen. Most of them have chosen to implement in another class.
Makes more sense. Carol.
And I want to make sure, and you've just told us a little bit about this, but it really seems really important to me that if we're just offering something to meet the standards of the law or what the code says, versus professionals saying it's not very meaningful if we have a week-long snapshot of this requirement, but it is meaningful if it builds on all of the other refusal skills and peer pressure issues, and that makes it a meaningful then experience versus the law says we have to do this and here's 2 weeks
They can still choose to do what you're saying.
And that apparently they have, but I also believe that it's our responsibility as a board to say, here's the most effective way to do it. We're not mandating you're right, but I don't necessarily want to encourage something that I don't believe in, that professionals have said is not a very effective way to teach something.
Just one more comment, and my apologies, but I do know in talking with Botvin that in a state that was doing something similar, what had happened is at the end of their contract, Botvin got all of these calls from LEAs saying, we have all of this material, what do you want us to do with it? They had offered it, but they didn't actually use it, and to me that hurts students.
Yes.
And so I want to make sure that we don't do that as well.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well, it just depends on what you think the proper role of, I get down to the nuts and bolts of what is a good sound education, and we just kind of throw in all these other things and decide. It's hard, like I said in an earlier thing, to offer. When you go to a restaurant that has everything under the sun, they don't really specialize in anything well. And so that's one of my concerns, is we continually replace a family's role and responsibility. And this is one of those things where a family may be covering this very well on their own. And so that's why I like the offering, because then they don't want to waste their academic time on this when they feel like this is something they're doing very well at home. And not every place, so you can offer it, and the people that feel like that's something they need help with, they can choose to do so. But anyways, that's my concern, is it just seems like we're continually expanding.
But if it's a requirement of the law,
it's a requirement to offer it.
Right.
Not for every child to take it.
No, but if it's required in the law, it seems like your objection goes back to the legislature to say,
well, of course,
get this out of the law.
So I'd like to meet the law.
By having it be offered.
By having it be offered and not necessarily always
and
embedded.
I guess I have a different perspective. If the law is going to require it, which I probably agree with you that I would rather it not be required, then we ought to do it well in a way that we know is meaningful.
We still can do it well, but it's easier for parents that don't want to choose it if it's a standalone course than if it's embedded in everything. And they can choose to do that. I don't put my kids in health because I'd rather cover all that on our own. But
and if I may, I just wanted to point out the rule as written allows LEAs to choose where they put it. If it's standalone, science, health, wherever they want. And I did want to highlight up on the screen, I've got the statute. So you'll see in 6B, number 2.
Do your control plus so I can maybe possibly see it?
Yes, I'm going to highlight here number 2, although it highlighted everything above it. To the extent, so this is when we're selecting the providers. So the law requires that we have to look at the extent to which the provider's underage drinking prevention program aligns with the core standards. So we did make that part of the RFP, and that is why it ended up aligning most closely with the health standards. The law did require that we were looking at what core standards this would fall with. So I just want to provide context for why everything is the way that it is. We're kind of, the law is what it is, so we just did our best to follow what was there, and we're trying to make sure we give as much flexibility to the LEAs in terms of how this is offered, where it is offered. We're not telling them anything beyond you have to offer it because the law says you have to.
Okay, so I'm still going back to, I'm just thinking of these online providers that don't necessarily have a mechanism to do that, and it's not very helpful to send a little teeny student manual, when you're in a situation where you don't necessarily have a teacher in an online program, not all of the programs have a teacher. They have teachers assigned to like the student as a whole, but often the parent in an online situation becomes the teacher. And anyway, so I don't know that it's helpful to be able to send that little student manual to every single student. And so it seems like we need to have an exemption until we can get a mechanism in place to have the course taught online.
We can't have the exemption, can we, because it's...
Well, we'd have to go ask.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if we're not able to provide it, we're not able to meet the law.
But you're saying we provide it because we
'Cause
can
it's-
send these books to them.
But we,
Yeah,
yeah, but that's just,
sorry, I don't want to.
No.
I mean, I haven't seen it. Maybe it tells everything.
It's pretty clear.
It is very clear.
You saw it.
But when a student takes an online class, just to make sure I understand, because, again, it's up to each LEA to determine where they want to implement this. Is every class self-paced led? Is there no, because I'm not.
It depends on the makeup of the online environment.
So I think
some
it
are
would-
self-paced.
So wouldn't it still be up to that LEA to determine what class they implement it in that has that enough support to support the student?
Yes, but they may not put it in a course. They may do it as a standalone course, and so then what?
Would they need a teacher that's trained to be able to teach that?
It doesn't say that they have to. And so if they were offering it as a standalone course in an online environment where the parent becomes the teacher of the course, how do you do that if they don't have all the materials?
But they will have the little book, and
Yeah,
as I've looked through that little book, it's
So-
almost like every lesson
the high
is.
school.
So then
I mean, the
that
things
kid
I've
just-
looked at.
here's the middle school.
You can see it's almost like it's not online, but it is. I mean, a parent could go through that.
I mean,
think.
this is a lot cumbersome than all those books, so they just take
Yeah.
it and read it.
But I think if a
This is
parent and a child
teachers.
chose that, they could go
Right.
through that together, just like an online course, except it's paper.
It just seems like, why do we have a teacher training book if the student can just...
Well, because I
take
guess
this
we're
and
hoping
read
that most students are going to get it with a trained teacher in a classroom, right?
Yes,
I
and-
mean, you
And
know.
I do want
Can
to
we
point
have
out there is
copies
a
of these?
parent, Jody just pointed this to me, so I don't take credit for knowing this, but there is a parent guide as well, so if parents want to
Oh.
opt someone out and teach it on their
Okay.
own, there is a guide for parents to use.
And parents could request that?
There is, but I would need to go back and ask, as far as, does
Would
our
they provide
funding
that?
allow to do that? That I don't know. And that's something we'd have to look into, because I want to make sure we don't compromise the funding that
Right.
is allocated for what it's asking us to do. And I think your question is, can we go back and ask for
Yes.
an exemption for online?
Well, I think we need to get feedback from different charters, different programs around the state to see what it looks like for them. And so, I mean, I can't determine, but what it looks like, what their LEAs, whether it's the charter or a third-party provider, there's different elements, or there's LEAs that have just a standalone online school. And I know, anyway, so I would like to see feedback from those, if we could reach out specifically and ask them, how has this been brought to you, to your LEA? Do you have any recommended changes?
Oh, I would be happy to do that. Most LEAs.
Because I don't
is-
want to make that decision.
Most
but-
LEAs, the majority have chosen health. But I would be happy to reach out and ask them, how that's been brought to them and how
Well, okay.
if they have enough support, right, to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So
there's a parent training.
So in terms of moving us off dead center here, I came back and I felt like watching a soap opera.
What?
Would it be good to delay this for a month and have Rhett check with some online programs and
Check with Botman.
check with the program, yes, the provider, and see if there is information that see what the online programs are doing, what would work for them, and also what Botman apparently can provide to online.
Yes, Botman
Programs.
does currently have it for middle school, but they're working on high school.
Okay.
Yep.
What we could do in the alternative for high school.
And do we have time to delay that?
A month.
Or?
Well, yeah. The statute requires we were supposed to have a rule for the criteria of the RFP and for 2018-19 school year. So we're already
November,
behind.
probably.
No, it was already supposed to
So-
be done. So that's part of the concern, is that the curriculum was selected, it was sent out without a rule attached to how to govern it. And so then we're getting feedback because people weren't clear. And this is what I want to make sure So we're required to offer it, but then there's some misconception about we're required to require it. And so, has that been cleared up so that the LEAs know they're required to offer it, not required to require it?
It's an elective.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
By saying it.
It's
Yes.
an elective. It's an elective.
Your point is well taken, and I think there has been some great internal debate about when this, the legislative context is this was attached to the alcohol revision bill, getting more licenses to restaurants. And this was like one way to sell that. It was thrown in, you get 1.5 million ongoing for this program, which is where many people say, well, that amount of money suggests this is required to be taken for every student, not just offered, because that's enough money to cover materials for every student every year in those grades. So there is debate over that. Unfortunately, the legislative record, as you go back and listen to the debate, they never really got to this program because they were debating so much about the alcohol licenses.
Zion Curtin was a lot more important, right?
Can I make one comment
Please,
too?
Angie.
And I apologize.
Well, then how is it written?
I wasn't here to begin with, but part of the other issue was we didn't know. The reason why the rule didn't come before the RFP is because again, the focus of the bill was alcohol, and there was just this, we want to provide some underage drinking prevention support here, but there wasn't enough direction in the statute to really give us an idea of what they really wanted. And so we were kind of at the mercy to see who was going to respond to the RFP. And I believe we only had 2 responses, 3. And the interesting thing is there were some talk of a different provider that may have been wanting to respond to this RFP that would have had it go in a totally different direction, but then that provider never responded. So it was kind of a weird situation where we generally do the rule before the RFP, but because we as staff had no idea what to put in the rule, because we didn't know who was going to respond to the RFP, it's just an anomaly. It's not our best practice, but it wasn't staff requesting this program.
Right.
And so we thought, well, let's put it on an RFP, see what we get, and then we'll draft the rule.
Right, but then it seemed confusing to then send the curriculum out. So right now, it's already being implemented in districts across the state without direction on whether or not they're supposed to require everyone to take it or just make it an offering.
Right, and I think that's where the rule
That's
could
where the
provide
rule-
clarity.
Yeah. Mhm.
And
Now.
unfortunately, I think you're correct that we, in hindsight, should have provided that clarity in advance. But if, in lieu of just rushing it, if we feel like we need to talk about it some more, I don't think there's any harm at this point. The harm, we should have done it.
We're already late.
Yeah, we're already late.
Well, as long as there's been notifications sent out to the districts to know that we're working on this rule, and at this stage, we can't require everyone to take this when we don't even know what the rule says.
Wow.
So is it, I mean, I don't know what to say about it.
I mean, I've gotten feedback,
'Cause I don't
and
know
that's the
enough.
problem is they're like,
You know more than we do.
I don't know what I do.
Well, that's why I just think we ought to wait a month,
So
get more
do-
information
yeah.
from online providers, get more information. But I think Lisa makes the point of, I don't want, and I think LEAs probably have enough on their plate that they're not stewing much over this particular issue. But if you can find an efficient way to notify LEAs that this is in process, and it is true that it is only required to be offered. But I don't care, personally, and this isn't really part of the motion, but if it's your best judgment as educators that it should be, it shouldn't be offered in isolation, then I think that would be appreciated by LEAs to hear who can still make their own choice. I think we don't do our particular, we don't do our job when we don't say it is our professional recommendation. This be included with other, with an ongoing discussion. So that's my motion to put it off for a month with all of those suggestions.
Okay, so the
which
motion
are
is to
suggestions.
put it off for a month
I wanna
with
add.
all those suggestions, discussion, or
yeah, I'd like to add a component. I'd like to see a draft written, and maybe you could reach out to Joy Lynn, a draft written with the reporting assurance,
Part of the
with the assurance.
What would be required for reporting?
absolutely. And
with
waive it.
that way to do it with the insurance.
Okay, so the motion is to bring it back to November with a draft.
Including the reporting.
Including the report, and then also I would add with the amendment of putting those who do not enroll instead of opted out on line 46 or 66.
Right.
I can't read
But
the
I'd like to
60.
see two versions of what, I mean, as written, but then also with the assurance.
Sherry, do you have that? Of course.
Yeah, to amend to Elisa's amendment, I think it's, I would like to know, you let folks discuss a little more completely what you think would give you the information you need to respond to the legislature.
So we get some good data, baseline data.
Yeah, so that I have your opinion about what you need, and I'm understanding that we want to be sensitive to LEA burdens.
Okay, does that get what everybody in the world wants?
No, just three of us.
Okay. Is there any other discussion?
Maybe there's some more comments.
Yeah, any other comments out in the great beyond? Okay, well, all in favor of that very long motion?
I
say
Very loose.
yes.
I would like to say yes.
Okay, just kidding.
Yes.
Yes.
I would say yes also.
Yes. Any opposed? Thanks so much
Thank
for
Thanks, Board.
the great discussion and for dealing with us all.
And your patience.
Jody.
That was
Yeah,
very
patience
nice.
is great.
It's a good discussion.
Okay, now we need to skip to action item 3.7 because we need Angie here.
Just in case.
Well, just in case there are questions. So, this is on R27404.
See that?
And really, it's just to, we need to make an amendment. Instead of having it say
See that curriculum.
SAGE, we need it to say RISE. So it was just a quick language change. Darren, go ahead and talk to us about that and tell us what we need to do.
Right.
But I mean, I can't.
Well, I don't know that I can tell you what you need to do. I
Well,
can
never mind,
suggest
then
some-
just make, oh, Darren,
Suggest
just
some
tell us what we need
things.
to do.
The 404, I'm going to offer my apologies to this committee. We had this rule to you a couple of months ago to fix a date
Yeah.
associated with the testing ethics policy.
Yeah.
And I inadvertently didn't notice that we had other language that needed to be fixed. We no longer will offer the SAGE, and it's referenced in the current rule. And we also now have a new high school assessment,
Yeah.
Utah Aspire Plus, which is not referenced in the current rule. And so you'll notice as you go into this rule, I think line 37 is the first place you'll see edits. And we've gone through this and attempted to fix those two issues, that SAGE is no longer part of Utah's statewide assessment system, and that we have a new high school assessment. So 37 through 41, we have changes. And then down to 122, 123, and then 131 and 132. Those, in that area, because the SAGE originally was developed for grades 3 through 11, and then there was a policy change that restricted it or moved it back to 3 through 10, then LEAs could still administer the 11th grade tests that were developed. It was optional for them. And so there was language in there to clarify and make sure they knew they weren't required to administer the SAGE test to 11th graders. And so in 122, 123, and 131, 132 is where you'll see those changes. So we're trying to clean up, and again, I apologize that I'm using your time inefficiently and bringing this back to you.
So the only changes are just these technical corrections
Mhm.
too. Do you have any questions?
No. I think we've beat this one to death too.
Then I will move that we approve the amendments to R277404, draft 1 on first reading, and forward recommendations for approval to the board on second and final reading. Any discussion of the motion? All in favor say
Aye.
yes.
Yes.
Just kidding.
I really want you to say R now.
Okay, our last one, we're going to do it. Okay, thank you, Darren.
Because Angie was here, it went really fast. I walked
It
out,
is.
she comes
Well,
in. It's
we were
like
just
this.
like,
I mean,
Love it.
we have her.
You're the one who makes it a soap opera.
I know, I
Then
think.
you won't need me. No,
Okay, so let's go to R27, action item 3.6, R277704, financial and economic literacy, integration into the core curriculum and financial and economic literacy student passports, which I was kind of interested in this whole idea of passports.
Oh, yeah.
I
Travel?
know. I love traveling.
Good times.
I saw that it even starts when they're very young. So this is up for continuation. It's 5-year review and continuation in November. Staff have reviewed it and have determined it needs to be necessary. So we have, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Travis Cook, State Board of Ed, CTE, Career Connections Financial Literacy, so it's a 50-50 split with some non-trad thrown in there a little bit. So,
Okay. All
here
right.
to answer any questions you might have, if there are questions.
I'm trying to see where the changes.
I'm just trying to
There are
see
no
what
changes at this moment.
the
Oh, it's just to be continued.
It's just to be continued, but I mean, also when I looked at it, like this may not be a course necessarily anymore. It might be integrated into, but that hasn't, or maybe that's
I'm looking
premature.
for the
There's
statute.
some
So is this the
background
only?
to
Okay,
audit.
yeah, would you give us some background on that?
Are those the only
So-
two sections of code?
Yeah, 53. So those
So those
codes,
are incorrect.
correct.
Yes.
Those are old. Those will be
Updated.
Okay.
And it's also got USOE instead of
Yeah,
USBE.
I saw that.
correct.
So the reason why there are no even format changing coming
Ah.
before you right now is the continuation is due November 8th.
Okay.
So we do need
Ah.
this to go to the board
Just
in
to-
November and be
Okay.
passed, so we can continue it. It is all going to be changed, however, because State Auditor Dougal he's just wrapping up and about to hot off the
He
press.
sent it today.
Oh.
Today,
While I
it is
sat
hot
in
off
this
the press.
Whoa.
Okay.
Right?
So we
no
now
wonder
have
you
to
don't know
audit.
much.
So Debbie and I both received a program review from
Okay.
Auditor Dougal. Not a formal audit per se, but it addresses some, for those that don't know, from a summary perspective, Utah is considered the only A+ state in the nation for financial literacy. That's due to the structural relationships we have in Utah. They actually invented the plus for us because
They like it so much.
yeah. So
I
so
like
in
it.
15 and in 17, that's been a number of national reviews. We get cited all over the place. However, what happens being so out in front of all of this is that the growing pains and the realities that we are seeing are very unique to us, right? We are very much in the weeds at this point of the process, and states haven't even started. I probably talked to a state a month, right?
Oh.
That says, we're trying to follow in your footsteps, we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that. So that's where we are. That's what the benefit of Auditor Dougal's response has been, is that now we're able to go even a step further. I'm very excited about what's in the review and some things that we can do to take our effort to the next level.
Okay.
I would love to believe that financial literacy was not needed. But since AARP just did a piece a few months ago on why it's a major debt concern for them, retirees are carrying student debt all the way through their careers and into retirement.
What?
One of the largest defaults.
I'm sorry.
Right, growing subsets of default right
It's
now.
one of the lowest percentages of,
Debt. Oh,
no, it has a
interest.
very low interest. That's how.
Oh.
Yeah, and so that's a scary thing, right? Which means that we incurred debt in this really small window of time, but then we kept it saddled on our backs for all of our careers. It's still a very valid conversation. Utah's extremely lucky. Lowest debt to student ratio in the nation, lowest default rate in the nation, the only A+ state when it comes to financial literacy in terms of the structural work that's been done. Do we have work to do? For sure, right? But we also are kind of making great strides. I got a piece that's sent to me again today by the Brookings Institute. We were one of 3 states identified as making the grade. So that's all to say. The majority of what's in rule is also in statute, and with the audit report, and we're in our 3-year cycle for the task force in statute to review the strands and standards. We'll be bringing all of those pieces back to this group.
So we don't need the motion to specify that because it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah, we just need to
Carol's better
approve
at
it
making
for
motions than me.
continuation. Would you like to make that
No, I
motion?
don't really like to make motions.
We move that.
Okay. Okay, well then.
We move that the long licensing committee.
But it says
Standards
long
assessment.
license on
Sorry,
here.
the standards
They
and
all-
assessment committee recommends this rule for continuation R277-704 and recommends it to the board for final passage.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to approve R277-704 for continuation on first reading and forward recommendations for continuation to the board on second and final reading. All those in favor say aye.
Arr.
Thank you.
It's not the last one, though.
Oh, I mean, say yes. Okay, we'll do it better the next time.
Professionally.
Oh, I forgot to ask if there's any discussion. I was so excited to be a pirate. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jenny keeps her Facebook setting on pirate. You know, that you can change the language.
Oh.
You can change the language to pirate.
You can?
Yes.
Okay, last the best of all the game
I used to.
is 3.8 College Readiness Assessment. Darren sent us the sample from LEAs because last month we wanted to find out what LEAs thought about whether or not we should have the writing assessment for ACT. We talked about the 27 or fewer colleges require, none in Utah require it. It's not in the composite score, it's an additional $15 and 40 minutes. But then we also debated how do we also show that we value writing in Utah. So Darren, do you have any updates for us?
You know, just the survey, I sent that ahead of time. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it. I was a little disappointed in the response rate that we received. I thought we would get more feedback than that. And then it doesn't provide you a lot of clarity, you know, a 6 to 8 split. I tried to give you the size of the LAs so you can kind of think of, see how many students were involved. The other thing I've done in conjunction with this issue is in reviewing the ACT contract amendment that was made, I don't know, a year and a half ago to bring writing into that contract. There's actually language in there. The intent, I'm assuming this was from the board, the intent was that under this agreement, the state may grant schools over which the state has binding authority discretion to offer their students the ability to take the ACT test with or without the writing component at the state's expense. Each student shall be permitted to choose whether to take the ACT with or without writing. So I've been in communication with our contact with ACT to find out why ACT signed a contract with provisions that they then said they couldn't meet. I haven't gotten a response from them yet. But when I came into this office, so it was.
Is that in here?
No, the contract isn't. I can get that to you though. It's a pretty lengthy document, but I searched on writing. But so and it's clear that writing is optional at the student level. That was the intent of the board at the time that was added. ACT can't deliver on that.
When you send it to us, can you tell us those page numbers so that we look at the specific spot?
Yes. Yes, I can. In addition, my communications with our contact at ACT has indicated that the soonest, because this consideration, if that was the intent, that might continue to be the intent of the board, and when could, if ACT can do that, when would it be possible? And she's indicated that the earliest, and so I'm a little uncomfortable with the way she worded this email, the soonest we could make it optional would be 2020.
Oh. And help me understand, maybe I'm missing something what you're saying, but it's not possible for ACT to comply because
they said they couldn't.
I wasn't involved in those initial. They don't have the way that the statewide assessment contract, or the way that the delivery system works for statewide assessments, that it wasn't possible. It was an all or nothing.
But my question was really simpler than you were thinking. It's just because ACT said it's an all or nothing thing. It's not. It's
currently.
So it could be the ACT's unwilling to.
Does that have to do with the scoring? Was there a scoring?
Yeah, when you look at the, because you can also as a student or an adult sign up under a private setting to go take the ACT at one of their national test dates, and you have a lot of choice. There's some variations that ACT can accommodate that way that but these statewide administrations are different.
And I think it's. This is just follow-up. I think it's probably cheaper to provide the Costco model to as many states as want it, rather than provide the a la carte model, which would be more expensive. So that didn't make it. I get it. Now I get it. Thank you.
Elisa?
I'm just curious if you have taken this to any of the attorneys that deal with our contracts.
Not yet.
If they've signed a document saying they could do something and now they're saying they can't and won't provide it, it seems like we have some legal standing.
Feels that way to me. I'm waiting for their response from their legal team as to why they're not meeting the obligations of the contract, and then work with our legal staff. But in terms of the decision before you right now, there's not an option for ACT to offer it the way the board intended with this contract amendment.
So we need to make a decision
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I feel like we've already belabored all of our opinions last month, and so I just wanted to state it publicly. Go back and listen to that discussion last month, because given the feedback we got, the small sampling, it didn't change my opinion, and I still don't feel like it's a worthwhile expenditure, and I think there's other ways that we can show we value writing, so I'm not in favor of pushing the writing out as required. If we could do it as an optional thing for the LEAs to choose, I'm much more in favor of that, but if ACT can't uphold their contract, I have a concern with that.
And I talked to several high school English teachers, and the overwhelming feedback was, we haven't used any of the writing data from ACT. We have used writing data from Utah Compose. We've used it from benchmarks. We will have the benchmarks. We've used it from our own assignments. But I've yet to find a teacher who used the ACT writing as for any feedback. So that was a small sample. But I just think we can show we value writing in a lot of different ways, rather than 40 extra minutes, $15 more a student. So I'm also in favor of just not doing the writing portion.
And I'll defer to your expertise.
I think we can value writing in other ways.
Okay.
So,
But we have kind of a difficulty anyway with ACT, so that we have to figure out.
Yeah.
So you'll give us updates.
and students can always opt to take the writing portion on their own. It's not like we're saying you cannot do that. So.
Right.
Anyway, well, would
Do we
somebody
need a
like to make a
motion?
motion?
So our motion is to
not
So
include
yeah,
writing.
what I was asking is whether, as we move forward with our contract, our future contract with ACT, whether to negotiate to include writing or not, and it sounds like you're.
yeah, I would move that we negotiate, in our future contract negotiations with ACT, I would move that we don't require the writing component. Ideally, that it could be optional, but if it's not, it's not.
Yeah.
And then pass that preference on to the board.
Yeah, any discussion of the motion?
I'm just thinking if they could uphold their contract, I was okay with it being
Me too,
optional.
me too.
But if they can't uphold it and it's now by default required, then no. And so I think that we really need to wait until we hear back from them if they're willing to.
Well, or if you give me direction that in the contract development part, I mean, the contract comes back to the board anyway eventually, but during that negotiation phase, to move that direction, that if it's optional, we want to include that. If it's not optional.
That's, I thought what my motion was, that we want to include it if it's optional, we
you
don't
put
want to
that.
include it.
Okay,
if it's
Patty,
not.
and then I think we have public comment.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we want to mention ACT in the motion or not.
Oh.
Because with ACT, are we going to say
Oh, yeah.
contract to provide a college readiness assessment will not include writing, or are we saying specifically in our negotiations with ACT?
Yeah, it's a good point.
That's a good point.
Because we haven't been through the sole source
We
procurement.
haven't been through it yet, so if we specifically say ACT, then that locks us into.
I thought we were locked in.
Well,
That's
we're
part of this decision.
I believe,
yeah.
I believe we are, because the statute says we have to select, the board has to select the test that's most commonly submitted to Utah universities. But we do still need to go through the procurement process.
We probably should use statute. Maybe.
Yeah, we have to go through the procurement process to see that that's appropriate. So.
Did we have some public comment? Oh, please, come.
I know that writing, they can take it again, and then if it's not optional like we had asked them to do. But for some students, that is an additional expenditure, which may impact your fee waiver students, the ability to take the writing portion of the test, because they would have to pay to take the test again, and not have the funds to do that.
So you're saying that?
I'm saying you should still keep it optional and.
Well, if we can.
Yeah, and we, yeah.
By the contract to make it optional.
Yeah,
if you change it here now to say no writing, then they have no recourse to want to change their contract.
No, and I don't
part of
think
the
any of us
motion
wants to
was,
do that.
we don't want to do that if it is optional.
We do want to make it available if possible, and you're just gonna, maybe you need to bring back information. I think our direction is clear, and you will bring back information
I don't
about
know.
what AC will do.
I don't know if we need to make an action yet until we know. I feel like we need more answers, unless there's a time.
Is it time?
But I think
what time is
Darren, what do
sensitive.
we?
Didn't you want to know if we wanted to include the optional
Yeah,
possibility.
so why I put as action is I'm
Yeah.
seeking direction
Yeah.
about how to proceed as we go into negotiation, which our contract doesn't expire till June, but it's still the length of time to get things in place, especially if we end up having to switch vendors, what that does to the field. So we're hopeful to move forward as soon as I get direction from the board, move forward with the sole source procurement method and get through that and then go into specific contract negotiations.
So I think our motion is to
Make it
include
optional.
writing if it's optional, if we can do that. If not, in the college readiness assessment to not, I mean, if that's not an option, then we don't include it. I don't know
Or
if
we come
that's-
back,
I don't know if that's too.
But if you're looking for other vendors, it would be my choice to have it be, go with a vendor that made it, that allowed it to be optional.
Mhm. But it has to be the one most commonly used in Utah.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
it
It's
has to be
it was a vendor
predictive
bill.
of college success, and I don't know what other one besides ACT
So
does
it's kind of a vendor bill, and
It was
I'm stuck
completely a
with it,
vendor
now
bill.
can't do the job, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Is that clear enough?
Yeah,
That's my.
it's
Okay.
helpful for me
Okay.
to move forward with that work.
Sherry, you got that okay?
Do we need to vote on that?
Okay, yes, we do. Wait for it.
Yeah.
All in favor, say
So I told you I came here for fun.
It's so much fun. Okay, do we have to motion to adjourn the committee meeting?
No.
Or do we just say goodbye? Bye.
Yeah.
Later.
So Robert's rule says
Oh, okay.
if you reach the end of the agenda without, so you would have to say without any objection, since we've reached the end of the agenda.
Without any objections, since we've reached the end of the meeting, now what?
I
Comma.
adjourn. We adjourn.
We adjourn, period.
We're done.
We're done.
Thanks, everyone, for hanging out.
Thank you.
Where's Scott?
Good job, Jenny.
I don't know.
Scott.
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 I don't know.
Scott.